Paradise. And let me turn on the mic and say it again. I'm calling to order this town council meeting for Paradise for January 9th. And first order is the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand for our pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please remain standing for the invocation.
Lord, we thank you for this opportunity to be here tonight to do the work of the town. I pray you give us the wisdom we need, and I pray that what is said is done in love, and that we do it with the right heart. Be with all those that are working out there. Thank you for the rain. We need more, and we appreciate what we got. And we just pray that you'll guide us tonight. In your name, amen.
Roll call. Councilmember Crowder is absent. Councilmember Culleton?
Here.
Councilmember Tryon? Here. Vice Mayor Boland?
Here.
And Mayor Lassonde?
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, the financial update. Jim Court from Meter Investments.
In the flesh.
There we go.
I don't have teeth ready. Jim, I will.
Yes. There we go. Wow. Great to see you.
How we doing? Yes.
You're much taller than I
You think so?
You can just tell me slide, and I'll change it.
Yeah, you can go to that next one there. So I think it's been September that we spoke last online, but I was in town, so wanted to stop by and give you another update here on what's going on with the portfolio and in the markets and what our outlook is really heading into 2024. I think you have the slides in front of you. We can see it on the screen here as well, but just talking about some of the major events that happened in the markets in 2023. Each year we throw some things together, market related and not, but the main thing that the market's been focused on is the Federal Reserve, and that's, as fixed income investors, that's always what we're watching, is what's driving Fed policy, which ultimately is going to control interest rates, which directly affects the income that you're going to make on your investment portfolio. And so the Fed has, as we've talked about since March of 2022, been raising rates off of the zero interest rate policy that we had during COVID, and now we're up to a range of 5.25% to 5.5%, but they actually have not raised rates since the end of July. So they've been in a period of pause now. And the ultimate goal has been to raise rates to bring down inflation, and as we're starting to see the effects of that, now that's really the ultimate question in the marketplace right now, is how long can the Fed pause and stay here before they ultimately start going the other direction. Mark, if we want to flip to the next slide. Just to reset the stage and the context of interest rates, how they've looked over the last couple of years, and I'll walk you through sequentially what we're looking at here, just to refresh where we were when all this money came in and what the market looked like at that point, or even going to the end of 2021 with the orangish red line there on the bottom of the screen. So we're looking at a 30-year yield curve here. When we're buying investments for the town's portfolio, we really can only go out to 5 years based on California government code. So we're really focused on the first 5-year portion of that. But looking at how low rates were at the end of 2021. And then fast forward to the green line at the end of 2022 when the Fed was raising rates so rapidly in the second half of 2022, the whole yield curve starts increasing substantially, start being a lot more rates to buy in the marketplace. Go to the top line there, that's where we were at the end of October of 2023. As the economy was still very resilient, the talk of higher for longer was settling into the marketplace at that time, of the Fed potentially even raising rates again and then staying there longer than expected. That started to evaporate pretty quickly here in the last couple of months of the year, and you can see with the lightish blue line then, rates started to retreat again at the end of the year. So They ended 2023 almost identically on top of where they were at the end of 2022. You can see at that line, except for the very front end still, with the overnight Fed funds rate being up where it is right now in that 5.25% to 5.5% range. Going on to the next slide, and what caused that drop in rates at the end of the year was really in November. One of the Fed Board of Governors, Christopher Waller, started talking about the case for potentially needing to start cutting rates. And this was, even though the market's been anticipating this was the first time that the Fed has actually been conveying the thinking that they might be ready to start moving lower again at some point here this year. And his argument was essentially that as inflation is starting to fall, if just by doing nothing, they are actually being more restrictive. When you look at a real interest rate, which is the nominal rate less the rate of inflation, if inflation is continuing to fall, that's making effectively the real interest rate higher just by doing nothing. So they're with the expectation that inflation is going to drop into 2024 and 2025, they would need to cut rates along with that to keep the real rate of restrictiveness essentially in check as the economy hopefully gets into what they would like to be a softish landing here, with continuing to bring down inflation without sending the labor market into a significant recession. When you go look at the next page then, just a couple more on the market here before I get into the portfolio. But when we're looking at that anticipation for inflation, on the left-hand side, we're looking at a lot of different lines here, but the core PCE, which is the Fed's preferred measure of inflation, the Personal Consumption Expenditures Index. And looking at it on a year-over-year and a 3-month and a 6-month basis, all of those different measurements peaked coming out of COVID with all of the fiscal stimulus that was thrown into the economy, and then as the Fed has been raising rates over the last year and a half, that inflation level is starting to normalize more toward the Fed's target. And you can see on all the different measures, they are getting back closer to that 2% target. When you break out that PCE inflation into goods and services ex housing, and then looking at housing, seeing the different factors that have been influencing it. Goods where they had peaked so dramatically in late 2021 and early 2022 have fallen to almost 0% inflation there, really helping to bring down the overall number. And it's really the services and then the housing effect that's contributing to any positive inflation at all right now. But we are starting to see that the rate of inflation at least start to come back more toward the Fed's target level there. And then the last one in the market here on the next slide, looking at the leading economic indicators. So that there's a nonprofit group called the Conference Board that publishes this leading economic indicator index, which is meant to be more predictive on where the economy is going to. And even though we've seen a lot of resiliency in the economy in the face of these high interest rates that have been out there now, the leading index for now a record 20 consecutive months has been pointing downward, that there is expectations of slowing coming throughout the broader economy. And what this chart on the left-hand side is showing is that typically every time this leading index starts to dip, you get into the periods of the vertical bars are periods of recession. So typically it starts to dip for a couple months and you get into a recession. We've now had it dipping for 20 consecutive months, haven't hit the recession yet. But those indicators, except for the stock market recently, which is one of the components of that index, basically everything else, manufacturing starts, housing starts, this shape of the yield curve, different consumer expectations, all starting to point toward some significant slowing coming in the economy there, which would again give the Fed some reason to start reducing interest rates then. Last thing on the right-hand side, it just is the Fed's own expectations. Their latest summary of economic projections that they released at the Fed meeting in December, again, started to show their own expectations of potential rate, of likely rate cuts coming into 2024 and 2025, graphed against the Fed funds futures with the darker blue line, so that's the market's own bets, if you will, as far as what they're expecting with the Fed funds rate. One thing I would point out is that the Fed's projections are always based rather smoothly. They think things are going to go as they anticipate them with their own policy. What we've seen historically does not happen. We've got into periods of the great financial crisis in 2008 where they had to cut dramatically, the periods of COVID where they had to cut dramatically, and then we saw inflation materialize so quickly over the last couple of years, and they had to increase dramatically. So while they anticipate all of this stuff gradually happening, that's not the world we typically live in. So we want the portfolio to be prepared for whatever happens then. Now getting into the portfolio. We have this updated here through the end of the calendar year. So broken down into the securities portfolio, which is what we are essentially managing, which is what's held in custody at US Bank. And then the class portion is the cash, if you will. That's what Amy has access to on a daily basis to be able to pay the bills. And so I talk to her frequently to make sure that we have an appropriate liquidity buffer on hand, to make sure that you have the cash that you need to make the daily expenses. And she has been doing, as I mentioned the last time, just an unbelievable job of getting these reimbursements in from these projects timely to be able to keep that cash buffer on hand, which is twofold. The cash rates are so high right now. That class rate is paying about 5.5%. So the more you can keep in there and the quicker those reimbursements come in, the more income that class portion generates. And as long as that buffer is there, that also gives us the ability then, as bonds are maturing in the portfolio, to be able to reinvest them into the market that's much more attractive than it was when these funds were originally invested in 2020 and 2021. So the combination of those two effects of getting these reimbursements in extremely timely now has been vital to the outlook for the investment income generated from the portfolio. So when you look at that total book value, it's up over $215 million now, so that the book value is the cost of the portfolio. There will be market value fluctuations based on what the market environment is doing, but the cost of the portfolio is what's really important here. I think when I spoke to you last time, that was only about $204 million. Since then, she had some significant reimbursements come in that spiked that number back up. So we're back over 215. That yield of the portfolio, which is a forward-looking number, up over 2% now. Again, when this first was built in 2020, it was about 0.4% in that dismal interest rate market, so that yield continuing to climb. And as bonds are maturing and reinvesting into this market, that yield will continue to climb going forward, which has the effect then of kicking off higher investment income down the road. When you look at the maturity distribution of that $215 million, we have that broken into the annual buckets there. So you can see it's still relatively front-loaded, and the majority of those funds maturing within the next 2 years. Both just the original investments continuing to age and the intention of keeping enough liquidity on hand there. So as we go forward here into next year, what we would ideally like to see is these bars start to even out, get a little bit longer with the maturities as we're trying to lock in these high interest rates before they potentially start going lower. The reality, though, is we need to make sure that you have enough cash on hand. So we don't want to get too aggressive with parking longer-term investments. So that's why it's important that as she's going through this reimbursement process, working with the various departments on the expenses coming up, that we're staying in communication to understand really the flexibility that we have as far as being able to get some longer-term investments in the portfolio. But the more that we're able to do that, the more that's going to benefit your investment income for years to come down the road as we lock in 3, 4, and 5-year rates at these rates that we haven't seen since 2007. So that would be ideally what we have here. I'll point out like the 4 to 5 year bucket in there, that 21 million roughly. Those are all investments that we've been able to make over the last year that look really good right now. Those were bought before we saw the longer term dip in yields over the last couple of months. Those are locked in at rates 4.5% to 5% that actually have unrealized gains in that portion of the portfolio. So the more we can do that, the more we can lock those rates in. That's going to continue to generate higher interest income. The asset allocation, I'll point out on the top right pie chart there, that's the different asset classes that the portfolio is invested in, all compliant with California Government Code 53601 and the town's approved investment policy. Then the last page that I'll get to here in the next one, recapping the cash basis realized investment income generated from the portfolio in the last fiscal year and then to where we are right now. This is just on the securities portion. It does not include that class local government investment pool that she's using for liquidity. So that's generating additional income. But just from the securities, last fiscal year was about $1.75 million. When you factor in that class balance, it got up to just shy of $2 million. Now, when you look at this fiscal year, The left half of the months, or the 6 months that we've already received, realized that income. The darker blue bars are the anticipated income coming in based on the bonds that are currently in the portfolio, so that's when they're going to kick off their cash flows and when you're going to realize this income. Just from the securities portion, up over 2.7 this year. We've already also realized about 380,000, I think, from class, so that puts us up in the 3.1 million range. Expected realized income for this fiscal year, which is way above the budgeted amount that we had at the beginning of the year. And as long as that class balance can stay in the $20-25 million range that we're targeting, that will continue to generate significant income, where I think the total could really be more in the close to $3.5 million range this year for the realized investment income. Going forward, the securities portion will continue to increase, again, as we're shuffling out the old bonds, getting them into the newer market. So that'll be done just by the yield increasing. The biggest part of it, though, is going to be the size of the portfolio, if we're able to maintain the size as it is. And so that's where, as we're going through these reimbursements, the quicker they can come in, as she keeps doing a great job with that, hopefully the portfolio can stay roughly the same size, and then that anticipated income will continue to increase. Where we expect to see the decrease into next year is as the Fed funds rate likely starts to go lower, that will have a almost perfect correlation to what the class yield is going to do. So that the cash component, while it's generating so much income right now, we do expect that will go lower as the Fed starts to cut rates, but the securities portion is going to start carrying the water a little bit more then and continue to build up that investment income going forward. So in general, the trends are good, and just what's going to be key is how much of that balance we can keep in the portfolio going forward to be able to be reinvested at these rates that we now have in the current marketplace. That's all I have on this slide. I believe that she also included the actual monthly December investment report here. I have it as well. If you have it in front of you, it's got all of the detail of the investments of the town's portfolio. If there's any specific questions on anything that you're getting, to make sure you understand the information, glad to field any of those as well.
So you feel we're going into recession with that one chart this year?
I think it's very possible. The one with the leading economic, that board that makes that index, they are predicting a shallow recession in the first half of '24, which is maybe a little bit sooner than I think the Fed even thinks. But in my view, it's whether it's a technical recession or not, and how deep it is or not, it's just that we want to have a consistent approach to the portfolio, and being able to have a longer duration in the portfolio over time will benefit the town, so that the more that we can keep reinvesting out 3, 4, 5 years on a consistent basis over many years, that's how you will maximize your income. But we need to do that in the context of making sure that you also have the liquidity on hand to pay the bills.
Are you bound by state law on what the percentage is going out certain distances?
To an extent, there are different asset classes that have percentage limitations as far as how much you can be invested in the different asset classes. On the maturity, it's really more of a final maturity overall. There's not really a percentage that needs to be kept within certain buckets, but it's more of just a prudent investment approach to make sure that we have some diversification.
Yeah, you're always turning over.
Yeah.
You're always.
Yeah.
Problem is, if there is a recession, you're saying that the rates could start coming down.
Yes.
Very definitely, and that could.
And so the sooner that we can reinvest all those bonds maturing over the next year or two into this market where the rates are high,
Right.
and lock them in, then as rates start going lower, those bonds are going to look real good and you're going to hold them for a lot longer. Right. Versus having them in short term, they're facing reinvestment risk, where if they mature in 3 and 6 months, then you're susceptible to what rates have done then, which we're anticipating are going to be lower. Yeah.
So I have a question for you. On our cash, or the class, as you call it, do you have a percentage that you're looking for there? Like, do you have a percentage rate that you're like, okay, the town should keep this % of our portfolio liquid?
Yeah, and to your comment there, when I say class, that's an acronym for, I don't know what it is.
Cash.
Liquid assets, California liquid assets, something. It's a local government investment pool. And so it acts like a money market fund, and so that's just an acronym for one of the California local government investment pools, and it happens to be paying a very attractive rate. So that's what I'm referring to when we talk about class there. We have been targeting about 20 million lately to be in that pool. We think that was some of the anticipated projects coming up and Amy's projections on how the reimbursements could work on that, we probably are going to look to get that buffer a little bit higher here over the next few months. So to be, again, number one is to be able to meet the liquidity, make sure that you can pay the expenses until you get the reimbursements. But within that context, as much as we can, we want to have some flexibility to get back out in the market longer term as well to lock in those rates. But 20 million's been the target. We're probably going to start upping that a little bit.
Okay, so I've kind of heard the same thing, that there's a potential for an inflation or recession, which is a little frightening at this point. So are we going to look at the monies that we have in 1 to 2 years, we're going to look at trying to move those into longer term before too long? Or what were your thoughts?
We will opportunistically be looking to sell some of those securities to move them longer as we get comfort that of how much of that you're going to need for liquidity purposes. But because that 1 to 2 year area specifically is so bulky, I think that's a good observation, that we'll be looking to, when we can, sell something, move it out a little bit longer. The problem with some of those is that that particular part of the portfolio is where it's most underwater. We bought those at much lower yields that you would have to sell it at less than you paid for it, which there's nothing wrong with that as long as you can make sense of why you're doing it. Yeah, but we want to be selective when we would look to do something like that.
Thank you.
So that is the penalty if you sell it.
There's no penalty, you just have to sell it at whatever current market rate is, and so you have the cost you paid for it, and you got to sell it at whatever the current rate is. And so there are certain bonds in there where you would be selling it less than you paid for it.
But you are willing to take that risk.
When you have an opportunity on the other side that can offset that, then yeah,
Who makes it pay?
yeah.
So if you're gonna raise this class thing from 20 million to 25 or whatever you're gonna raise it to, that's just gonna take money out of investments somewhere else, right?
It would be, yeah, so maturities coming out of the U.S. Bank securities portfolio, rather than reinvesting into another longer security, I would just have Amy transfer that out as the bond matures, move it over to class so that you have more liquidity on hand there.
And we'd have less
Investments.
revenue generated.
Well, class is paying a very attractive rate.
So we're making some money.
Oh, you're making a lot. That's actually the highest rate right now because of the inverted yield curve that we have. But the risk is that when the Fed starts cutting, that rate goes immediately with it. Whereas we want to lock in the longer term bonds. Yeah, exactly.
Any other questions?
Speaking of which, I was just watching the news at my hotel before I came in. I saw Steve in Washington.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Hopefully you can fly home.
yeah,
Snow and all that.
yeah.
All right.
So when's the money run out?
What's that?
So this is just what our investments are doing, and like, this is not, you guys aren't telling us like how long this will last? Is that a different
Yeah.
group of people?
That is a different group of people. Yes, yes.
Model, yes, different.
Thanks.
All right.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much for that.
Appreciate it.
You're welcome. Good to see you.
Is there any cards on it?
No cards on this item.
Item 1F, the early warning sirens update from Colette Curtis.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you for the opportunity to present an update on the early warning siren project. Are the speakers not working very well? Is that what you're telling me, Brian?
No, it's good.
Okay.
Good.
Okay, great. Well, let me just get this presentation going here. And I'm going to be presenting this tonight with Brian Selecki, the project manager in the Recovery and Economic Development Department. Okay, so we will get started. So wanted to start with a little background on this project. The Early Warning Siren System project really came about through the long-term recovery plan process, which we undertook right after the fire in February of 2019. So this is when we reached out to the community, asked them for their input on how we wanted to recover as a community. From that process, we received a lot of feedback, a lot of it around safety and different projects that we could undertake that would improve safety here in Paradise. And one of the things that was top of mind for our residents at that time was some of the gaps in our communication when it came to emergencies. So I think we all know during the Camp Fire there were some major gaps in communication regarding evacuations. So to fill that gap, really our residents wanted a solution that was redundant, that could be utilized when power goes out, when cell phone towers are down, something that can be relied upon in that instance, and that could be part of a larger communication effort. So still having those other communication options, but having something else to add to our array of tools that we can use in an emergency. So with all of that in mind, we moved forward with a program or a application through FEMA for a hazard mitigation grant to fund a siren system. So when we began, and this is, let me step back for a moment. So as I just mentioned, the idea for the sirens really is meant to be a part of our overall communication strategy. And this pyramid really shows how this is supposed to be used. So if you imagine before the Camp Fire, all of this communication actually existed, minus that very top piece of the pyramid, the early warning sirens. So we had social media on our website. We utilized press releases in our local media very heavily. We have AM 1500 radio, and we utilize Code Red, which has IPAWS and WIA capability. All of those things existed and continue to exist. We continue to utilize those communication methods. But now we have the early warning sirens, which there's a reason it's at the very top of this pyramid. This is actually when it comes to importance or severity, it goes from the bottom up. So, in your really lower level, kind of notification, maybe there's a storm coming, something like that, you would start with social media post. And then as the severity of the incident increases, you would move up this pyramid. So the very top of that is the early warning sirens, because they are only utilized in the case of evacuation. So they really are the last piece of this overall puzzle. So when those sirens are going off, you would expect all of these other communication tools to be utilized. So when it was determined that we wanted to move forward with a project that would include sirens as a redundant system, we reached out and applied through FEMA for hazard mitigation funds to do that. And this is part of that process. And I say part of that, it really is a very long process. There are steps in this process that are not pictured here. So when we reached out initially, we wanted to do this in one process: apply for the funding, get the funding, build the system. That's not how FEMA wanted to do it. They had us actually contract for a scope and plan first. So they awarded us $50,000 to go out and do that. So we did. We hired a firm to come in, scope the system, tell us, give us recommendations for what this should look like. With that plan, we went back again through the FEMA Hazard Mitigation Program process and applied again for construction funding. That was awarded finally in April of 2022, and we immediately went out to contract for our current construction contractor and began that process. So this slide talks a little bit about that advanced planning report that was done through the contractor Genesis. So that was that first part of FEMA's process where we had a scoping plan created. So this contractor went out and really created this report. They visited the sites. They did a hazard and risk assessment. They actually went out and did a community survey trying to find out what people's needs were, what they were looking for in this type of technology, and also gave recommendations based on today's best technologies and practices. So the system that they recommended included 70 decibel siren coverage, and with that coverage, that is intended to be reasonably heard outdoors and possibly indoors, depending on proximity to a tower. So 21 site locations were determined based on that topography, and that really was intended to have 70 decibels within every area of town, with some areas being much louder than that if you're really proximal to a tower. So it's also important to note the actual audibility is really contingent on real world conditions, right? So which way the wind is blowing, is it cloudy? Those types of things really do affect the way sound travels. And so this report is is very good. It provides all the information we needed to move forward. But there's a lot of real world aspects that we are now testing for, and we'll talk about that more later. So this is a coverage map that shows in that initial Genesis report what the decibel levels were going to be in Paradise based on this design of 21 sirens. So as you can see, the loudest areas are those green circles, and those are intended to be at least 90 decibels or higher. Those red circles are at least 80 decibels, and then the yellow is the 70 decibels. So that shows, of course, it's going to be the loudest right around the tower, and then as you go outward, it's going to diminish in the decibel level. So there's a lot of thought put into this and the way this was designed. Some of that thought was, well, obviously we want this to be heard absolutely everywhere. Can we make this 90 decibels in every location in town? That would require at least an additional 40 towers. So that's what this would look like in this map. So we kind of superimposed some more green circles to see what that really would look like. So this is what would reasonably provide 90 decibels at most locations in town, we think, based on this map. So when this was being drafted, there really is a balance between having this heard, the level of audibility and the cost, because of course cost per tower is part of this grant. So this was, this is the design that we went with. This is what it would take to get to that 90 decibels everywhere. And so at this point, I'm going to hand it over to Brian Selecki to talk about the current construction process, because he really manages the contractor that we have currently day to day.
Thanks, Colette. Good evening, Council. Thanks for having us for this update tonight. So from this point, we were awarded the ability to go forward with the process and go through an RFP process to hire an actual contractor to build the system according to the specifications in the planning report that Colette just did the quick overview of. A FEMA requirement is that a contractor involved in the planning process is ineligible to build the system. It's considered a conflict of interest in terms of the process, and so we went out to the RFP process. We had a number of contractors submit, and then we selected HQE after that process, and brought that here to council for approval, and then we began the work in the fall of 2022. The beginning work was really on the ground, looking at the planning report and seeing what was realistic. And what we found was that a significant number of the locations, approximately 10 of them, were not possible. Specifically because of reasons such as site conditions, public property. Many of them were on school properties or park property, which was a great partnership opportunity, but just complicated things with MOUs and agreements that would need to be put in place. There were areas that there were no right-of-ways where we thought there were. There were areas that PG&E could not provide power. And so that caused a kind of another level of environmental review from FEMA, so that caused some delays in the construction project. As we found new locations close to, some of these were moving 15, 20 feet, some of them were moving 100 yards, but that triggered additional environmental reviews through FEMA, which we went through. And once that was all approved, we again talked with council and we heard your input on desiring them not to just be bare siren towers, but we looked into the tree aesthetics and move forward with that, which you now see. So I thank the council for that decision. I think it was a really wise one. We also talked with our emergency personnel and decided to have some of the towers, 8 of them, have internally accessed traffic cameras that we could see in the event of emergency and monitor traffic flow and whatnot. So that is where we started the construction process. Where we find ourselves today, 20 of the 21 towers are up and active. As you've, I'm sure, heard, the Rocky Lane Tower is rocky, and therefore we are still working on that. The new foundation plans have been finalized after comments from our engineering department, and we're ready to start that construction in the next couple of weeks. So that final tower should be coming soon. 19 of the 21 towers have all their tree branches installed. The one tower down there on Pence, it was just having some delays with getting traffic control scheduled because it's near the road, but that one should be finished up here in the next week or two as well. And then the big remaining project is the connecting to AC power. Now, these towers are designed to have backup batteries and run on backup batteries, suggested for approximately 30 days. We're putting that to the test because these have been running on backup power for up to 6 months now. And surprisingly, they're still functioning really well. We are having some technical aspects or issues with batteries that we're discovering. That's because they're not being charged on full-time AC power yet. And so we have been working with PG&E to connect those 16 towers to full-time power. That was a major ordeal of engineering with PG&E to get all the approvals done, and that has now been completed. Trenching began about 2 weeks ago, and we are working steadily towards that. And so 16 of the towers are working with PG&E to connect to new power sources. 5 of them are connected to existing town power sources, and we are moving forward right now with a projection of 2 to 4 of those a week being completed, pending weather and all the things we encounter during winter. Moving into audibility. As you're well aware, we have been testing every month, and we've been collecting extensive data. We are surveying the community, we are getting technical data with decibel readings, and every month those data and those feedback information points are being used to make adjustments. And so we're not just testing them and then going to the next month. HQE is out there every month after the test making adjustments to towers as we refine software, as they refine hardware, as they find things that aren't working correctly, and whatnot. We have been taking decibel readings, and we've seen decibel readings throughout the town from 65 to 98 or so in the proximity of towers, and so it appears that they're functioning as projected. And I want to be really clear with this, is we're going to continue to take decibel readings, and as we get closer to the handoff, there is a very formal process of data collection to make sure this system is operating per the specifications. And so HQE will have a final testing process with actual data they will present to us of every tower and what the sound levels being projected are, and making sure they are per the specifications. And the towers are operating at full capacity at 36 volts. They are capable of going up to 38 volts. But you got to think of this as your car stereo. You can turn it up to 100. It doesn't necessarily mean it will be better or clearer. It might be louder, but it also can cause damage to the system. And so in an actual emergency, we could consider going up to full 38, but that's something to be determined as we move forward. So with that, I'm going to turn it back to Colette for some of our survey information.
Yes, thank you, Brian. Talking more about audibility, there's kind of quantitative and qualitative data. This is sort of both. So we have asked our residents every month as we have tested to tell us what they're hearing in our Can You Hear Me surveys. We had a great response to these surveys. Our first survey in June, we had 1,000 responses, which was incredible. It definitely dropped off pretty significantly after that. So right now we're getting between 350 and 450 responses, depending on the month. And the data has been really interesting to gather. Of course, it is fairly subjective, right? So there are a number of variables that can affect how well or not well people are hearing the system. And so we're really interested in how this is working, but we also have to keep that in mind. But we're very pleased with kind of what this is telling us, and it is also very helpful as we continue testing these systems as we're kind of honing this and getting this towards the project being completed. So as you can see here, this sort of summarizes some of the data here. So the first chart in the upper left, this is all tests that we have conducted since June. If you take all of that data together, 55% heard the siren, where 45% did not. So we do have slightly more than half that heard it. Now this takes into account that first test in June, only 5 towers were being tested. So there's really a big differential between that test and now where we're testing 20 towers. There's a pretty big difference there. But we're still really pleased with that even with so few towers in the beginning, we still were getting a good audibility. So when you look at the upper right, September through December, this is really when we had the largest component of our towers being tested. We have a 66% of people who took this survey. that heard the sirens. So we feel very good about that, especially knowing that these are competing with a lot of other ambient noise outside. You know, we could talk a lot about decibels and what just the ambient decibel level is in a room versus outside versus street noise. So it really is competing with a lot of noise that is just naturally existing. It's difficult to get above that. But you know, I think this is a pretty good response. And then we really wanted to highlight the November test because this one, you know, it's quite recent. A lot of people responded to this one. And you can see here, 72% said they heard the siren, whereas 28% said they did not hear anything at all. And of this, we really wanted to hone in on whether these individuals were inside versus outside, because I know this has come up as a question, whether, you know, if people are inside and can't hear it, what does that mean for this system? So if you look at the people who said they did hear the siren, 65% of those people were inside versus 35% outside, and then on the reverse, of course, you would expect people who did not hear that, 86% were inside. So that is absolutely a factor. You know, being inside a home reduces the ability to hear from outside by quite a significant margin, by 25 to 30 decibels. So it really, you know, and at that point you're competing with the television or whatever else might be happening inside. So, you know, that is pretty significant. It is still being heard inside, even though really from our initial report, it was never expected that this would be heard reliably inside. This is really meant to be that outside and in some cases inside. So again, this talks more about the inside versus outside data, which we found really interesting. Most people that are responding to this are inside. Because most people, as they're going about their day at this time of day, are inside and then are responding to this information. So then we also very recently have been testing two different tones. As you know, when we began this testing, we utilized the high-low siren. That siren was determined to be used because it is what law enforcement uses for evacuation when they're evacuating on their vehicles. And we wanted it to be similar so in an emergency there would not be confusion. So that's where we started there. But you know, we were getting feedback that maybe that wasn't the best tone to use. So we said, okay, well, let's introduce an air raid type tone. So that's what we did. So starting in October, we started testing the high-low siren and the air raid siren to try to get input on how those were being heard. So as you can see here, 45% of people actually heard them equally. 38% heard the air raid siren at a better rate, and the high-low 17% heard at a higher rate. I think it's tough. Anecdotally, you'll hear everything all over the map, but it was interesting to get this data. No determinations have been made yet on how we're going to, what tone we're going to use going forward. We want to collect a little bit more data. We just started doing this, but this has been really helpful to determine how we'll use this moving forward. Okay, so what's next for this project? So we are going to complete construction on that final tower on Rocky Lane. So we have a full, complete system constructed. We still need to complete the underground power, as Brian was telling you about. We still need to transition the activation control centers from HQE, our contractor, over to the town of Paradise. So that has yet to happen. That will happen once construction is complete. That is when that transition will take place. That's also when our town personnel will be fully trained by the contractor on how to do that. We plan at this point to test monthly through June of 2024, and then at that point, we will determine how we will test in an ongoing fashion, whether we continue on a monthly basis or if we change that. We also will decide if we will, what tone we utilize moving forward, whether it's one of the tones we've been testing or if we want to try something different. This is something we are continuing to monitor and that we'll analyze and decide. So we also, as Brian mentioned, will be confirming the decibel levels. Once the system is complete, we will confirm the decibel levels through sequential testing at each of the towers. So at the tower and at intervals away from the tower, and each on its own, to really make sure that they are performing according to the specifications and what our expectations are. The EOC policy group will make any final decisions on that siren tone, as I mentioned. That is the group that came together and made the guidelines and proposed those to council, which were approved. We'll also continue to educate the public on the full scope of all of our communication tools, how the system works, and how they can interact with it in the best way. So just to summarize kind of where we are and where we're going. So the design and operational specifications of this that were determined in that planning report, and they were approved by council in 2020, right before we started that process. HQE is constructing the system currently based on those specifications. As of right now, that is all going according to plan, but before we say this is complete and according to specifications, we have to do more final testing, and we can only do that once the system is complete with that tower installed and with all of the components complete. So that said, and at that point, that is when we would make any determination on whether the system is performing in a way that is acceptable to us as a community and to you as council. So we are going to provide all of that data to you once this system is complete. We will come back and provide all of this hard data on how the specifications are being met. We hope they will be met as we expect. If they're not, there are steps that can be taken and options to consider. And I want to talk about a couple of those now, even though none of these are things we would even explore or recommend at this point before we have the full complement of data once the system is complete. So these are all options to increase audibility if it really is just not meeting our expectation. So the first would be to consider installing additional towers to increase audibility above the current design plan. This would not be funded by the FEMA grant. The FEMA grant really is funding the project that we have scoped now that is under construction. So any additional towers would not be part of that, and we would have to consider funding a funding source for that. Another option to this would be installing speakers somewhere not on a tower. So we could install speakers on a building or something like that that would be less expensive. Maybe harder to find a location to do that, but it's something that we can consider, and we've spoken with our contractor about that option, and that's something that they would explore with us if we wanted to take that route. Another option would be looking at ways to increase audibility above the design plan. One of the drawbacks here in increasing the decibel level is there are safety regulations that limit the amount of decibels you can emit at that location. So you cannot go above 122 decibels at the tower location. Right now, we're actually emitting about that. So if we can't go above that as long as we want to stay within our safety regulations, which is very important. But there are other things we could explore within that, ensuring we stay within those regulations. And then the third option is to look at supplemental warnings for residents who would desire something additional, perhaps in their home. There actually are options where we could augment what our current system and towers have to include technology that would connect with a device that could be in a resident's home. And that also would actually have a visual component. So that would be something for the hearing impaired. That would be an option that we could consider. There is a cost related to both that device and augmenting the towers. But there also is an additional app that would be available for people to use on their phone. So there's quite a few options available in this area. They come with a cost, but there's something that we could explore if it does get to that point where we want to explore more options for audibility. Again, we looked into these options to see what we could explore later on if once the system is complete, we needed to do that. And so that is the end of the presentation today, but Brian and I are happy to answer any questions that you may have.
So I have a question, go ahead. I have a question about, so when you did the testing, were you able to isolate like certain towers? Like, so this tower here did really well, the people around it could hear everything. This tower over here maybe wasn't as great. We didn't get, were you able to do that, isolate each tower?
No, not yet, but that is something that would be achieved when we do the sequential testing. So what that would mean is we would test one tower on its own.
Okay, got it.
And then we would test at that tower and then, 500 feet away, 1,000 feet away, something like that, and get a decibel reading. So that is what that sequential testing would achieve.
So the other question is so for people that are inside and say they have their TV on or radio on, do we have an ability to say cut into the TV channel and say emergency warning, blah, blah, blah?
So we do. That is actually through Code Red. That is not through the siren system, but
that is through Code Red.
That is through Code Red and through the WIA iPause system.
And is Code Red, have we found, a way, because I will say during the fire, Code Red did not work. So have we worked out those bugs? Have we figured out what those issues were?
So the issues with that really had to do with cell phone tower availability and power outages. And so that, those are some of the things that we wanted to address with a system that is a siren that is not dependent on power and cell phone. And I will say, just to clarify, when I say the ability to break into TV or put a crawler like that through Code Red, it's not the same as the Code Red that is calling people. It's actually a completely independent system. We just access it through Code Red. So that capability would not be affected in the same way that Code Red was affected in the Campfire. Because it's a really separate system, we can just access it through Code Red, if that makes sense. So the end user in Code Red was not getting the messages that we were sending because cell phone signals weren't working. Whereas if we utilized Code Red to put an alert onto the TV, that would go through because we would be accessing it through Code Red and it would be going to the television station to do that.
Okay, perfect.
And so it's a separate.
And you'll be able to do that with the radio stations and things like that?
Yes,
And last but not least, if we could also put a message on the outgoing recording on our town phone, that would be
Yes.
awesome.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Are we getting 122 at all towers? Probably not at this point. 122 decibels, I think that's what you said, that,
Brian, do you want to address that?
Yeah, so the system is designed to emit 122 decibels. This is the sequential testing we're going to start doing as the system is completed to make sure that is happening.
so we don't know that it's happening right now.
We've tested it at some of the towers.
Okay.
We do know, but we've also been hearing, the tower at Gregory had a battery failure this last week, so it kind of squawked out, and so it did not, and so yeah, but that's being determined.
So, question also, when we're doing this testing, is there a way to do a test on Code Red also, just as a sequential test to see if people are getting that and how that's going?
Yeah.
Because the hardest thing with this is people aren't getting the fact that this is just one tool.
Right.
Correct.
They're thinking this is the only tool, and it's not. There's so many parts and pieces to this, and like you showed, I thought your diagram was great. I mean, this is the tip of the spear.
Yeah.
That's gonna tell people, you need to go down Skyway, you need to head up Skyway, you need, kind of give some direction, stuff like that, but is there a way we can do the other also to give them a feel, and we know that it works too. We've tested it, and when an emergency hits, you know how crazy it gets. You don't have to explain that.
Absolutely, that's a great point. And actually, each test that we have done each month, in advance of the test, we have sent out a Code Red message to everyone who's signed up for Code Red, alerting them of the test. So it is also a way to test Code Red, because we're sending out a Code Red message to everyone who is signed up. Now, there's not really a way for us to know if you've signed up and you haven't received it. Although, I guess we could pull that data through Code Red, which we have not done.
So that's been
And see
going
if
on
there's
those
bounce
Saturdays
back.
also.
Yes.
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 And also add
Not
that,
signed up, huh?
yeah, it's time to sign up.
If you're not getting it,
Yeah.
you need to sign up.
Yeah. Yeah, I would check on your sign up. And the last thing we have on the what's next list is educate the public.
Yeah.
Because we realize there's a disconnect there, like you're saying, of what the system is and how it fits into all the components. And so we've got a big education process ahead of us.
Yeah, and I guess, talking to people and they get, oh yeah, I heard it great, I didn't hear it at all, back and forth. Hear all things. I think the biggest thing I'm hearing is the concern that if something happens at night and I'm in bed,
Yep.
I said, well, your phone should go off if they sign up for Code Red, which I haven't done. But the phone should go off. There should be other things that happen along with that also. That's not the only thing that should happen, but that's the biggest thing in their head is,
Yep.
And I get it. If that would have been 3 or 4 hours earlier that day,
Absolutely.
so it'd have been a different outcome.
Yeah.
Totally different outcome.
I had a conversation today with a woman who was in tears on the phone because she couldn't hear it, and she said, I'm hard of hearing, and how am I going to hear if it happens in the middle of the night? And so I was talking to her about all the resources and how you can get connected and, get Code Red on your phone, and some of these, other technology items that we are kind of talking about possibly in the future could be some pieces to fill some of those gaps.
Since people sometimes listen to our meetings, what is the website for them to go to on Code Red?
So they should go to the Town of Paradise website,
Okay.
and they can go to the community section, and it's there under Reverse 911, or they can just search in the search box Code Red, and it'll take you to the page where you can subscribe or unsubscribe as well. So this has been a great way for people who had signed up for Code Red ages ago. They've moved away, and they do not want to receive these anymore. That is also where you unsubscribe from Code Red.
Yeah, we've got a few items here, if I could. On Code Red, I've signed up for it. Haven't been working for the phone company for 21 years, and I'm a bit of a geek. I get it on my home phone. I get it as an alert tone on my cell phone, and I get a text message, and I also get it via email. So I'm getting 3 different things every time we run those tests. The issue with it is happening like 30 or 40 minutes before the tower, so it's not time coincident with the tower, so people may or may not pay attention to that. If you had the second one saying this is a test as the tower is going off, which is really what should happen in a real event, it would be closer to what we'd be practicing like we're going to use it for real.
That is true. Although I would say, so there is a slight difference in between what we use Code Red for and what the sirens will be used for. Code Red could be used for an evacuation
Right.
warning or other messaging that is not an evacuation. But you're right, in an actual emergency, those things would all be happening simultaneously. You might get a Code Red saying there's an evacuation warning, and then 20 minutes later, you might get one saying it's an evacuation order. So, yes.
My question is, on all these systems, have we hardened any of those? For example, your Code Red, you get that out, you have to have an internet access here. What if you lose your primary internet access? Do you have a backup plan for that? And the same thing will be true of the AM 1500 radio. Do we have that hardened? Do we have a generator backup if we lose power? I know we've underground everything, but what if we lose the transmission line and we lose that power?
Right, so I am not going to put Chief Reinbold on the spot here, but so our Code Red actually is activated through the police department. That is also how the sirens will be activated. And it also, there is, it's not official mutual aid, but we help each other. So in the case of, if we needed to activate Code Red and we were unable to do that here for some reason, Chief Reinbold would reach out to the Butte County Sheriff's Office, and they would be able to do that for us.
So there are backup, there's
yes.
redundancy to that?
Yes,
Excellent,
absolutely.
Excellent, okay. On the cameras, where are those monitored? In the police station or in the EOC or?
Yes, so we have 2 systems, I don't know if you want to talk about this, Brian, but we have 2 centers. One will be here and one will be at police dispatch. Do you want to talk about
Correct, yeah, we'll have 2 control centers. One will be back here in the hallway by Jim's office, and one will be in the dispatch center, and so they'll be accessible there. The chief and other emergency personnel will also have a login that they could access remotely if needed.
Has that been tested?
Not yet.
Okay, so the cameras are installed?
The cameras are installed, and they're going through their testing initialization process right now, and so that's the next thing that's going to come online.
Will you be testing these towers over the years to see if there's any degradation as the amplifiers age?
Yes.
Okay.
And they can be tested silently, daily. They can actually send signals out and register the amount of signals being sent and received, but then we will have audible tests at whatever the emergency operations policy group decides.
The 36 volt versus 38 volts, do you know what a tower would sound like at 38 volts? Are you going to test that so you know that in case you decided to use that in an emergency?
I was pushing this with HQE today, and their advice was that the risk of damage increases if you go up to full 38.
I understand
and
that,
so,
but I'm talking about a one-time test to know the capability, because if you don't know it, then you're not going to want to risk it in an emergency, because why do it at 38 volts if it's going to damage it, then you lose the tower altogether.
Correct.
So,
And so that was the final conversation I had, before the meeting tonight was the increase in decibels, in their view, would not be worth increasing the volume.
okay, fair enough.
You all good?
I'm done.
So, I was at those meetings and after the fire. And I know that myself, and I'm of a generation that grew up in a neighborhood where we had air raid sirens that went off every Saturday at noon. In my little town, it was every day at noon. And I've been one of the advocates for the high-low sound that police cars use evacuating the neighborhood, sounding like a car alarm. And I think the siren is a much better thing. But at that meeting we had, when this became a big priority, because everything failed during the campfire, and that was our lesson. So it was, I think the people's idea was, we're gonna have a warning siren, not a high-low tone, but a siren, that we could hear indoors. And when I heard from you a couple of months ago that this system was never intended to be heard indoors, I know my perception at those meetings was we were gonna have a siren you could hear, whether you're at home, in your car, or out on the road. The first one we did here with the first tower, we couldn't even hear it here, Now granted that, and then I looked at I appreciate the survey. I read the stuff that people post online. It's more negative stuff than positive stuff. But we have about almost 10,000 people living here now, in our town. And you guys are only getting responses, the last one, under 400 people. And yet, we had these great numbers, 75%. That's like a couple, 300 people, out of 10,000. I don't see that as a success of this system. I mean, and to the other points that Greg and others and Rosen brought up about the Code Red, we're 5 years after the fire. How many people are signed up for Code Red?
I don't know that number.
I'd
have to look it
if it's
up.
an education thing that we're not doing, like if this is just the tip of the spear, and another concern said, okay, well, we can't turn up the double cycles because there's laws or rules. This is designed to be, in an extreme emergency, get the hell out of town. And so I don't care about safety rules. I mean, we need to turn the thing on so people can hear it. It gets their attention and they can do something. I know I haven't heard any of the voice commands. Even if this is going to be, they're garbled at best. And I've been outside listening for them, and I've been near towers. Where I live at my house, we couldn't hear it. A lot of the, I'll just stop there. The thing that your November test, the majority of the people indicated, or what was it, not the November test, you have more people, the people that heard both equally, but you had more people that preferred the siren than preferred the high-low. So, and in your report you say, at some point in time when this thing gets done in the next year or two, or sooner, that this, what is it called, the EO, this committee, who is that?
Sure, so that is police, fire, public works, town manager, and myself, and Brian.
How much weight are the people's response going to have in that committee's decision-making? I mean, if the majority of the people, the majority of the people said the siren tone is the better tone of the two in your most recent graph, why isn't that enough for you to make the decision or make the change?
Well, I wouldn't make the decision myself. We have to meet as a group to make that decision. So, and that certainly will be something that we will look at and
There's no
talk
reason why
about.
you couldn't do both, right? I mean, you could do both.
Well, it's confusing to
It doesn't,
people.
okay. Well, I don't know. So the one thing that was interesting that I didn't hear before, I didn't understand. So I understand we can't do over a certain decibel because of hurting people's ears. When you're doing the test, there's emergency, do we care?
That's my point.
I mean, I personally, but you're saying, what I'm hearing though, is we can't go above that, or we'll blow our towers out, so they're only made to go that high.
Correct. So FEMA has a cap on what the level of decibels is allowed to be at a tower.
I didn't
And so
know.
the system is designed not to go above that.
So even in an emergency situation, we can't go above that.
It's 122 decibels. is the FEMA requirement. No. 70 is the minimum when you get the coverage as it goes out. Sound, it might be, when I tested just outside of one of the towers.
You're operating at 90.
Well, it's broadcasting 122 at the tower. Right underneath, I registered it was like 96.
Okay.
Because, the sound's going out, not going straight down.
My point's the same thing. If we have an emergency, crank it up.
Yeah, but that's not a possibility.
Yeah.
You're gonna have-
It's a design limitation put on us by FEMA safety
And
regulations.
that's the tower's capability, you can't dial it up any higher than 122.
Correct.
Okay, well, thank you,
Thanks.
that's news.
Good luck.
Were there any cards on that, Dina?
Is there an opportunity for input? Just, I didn't know it was going to come up that way. Just as a suggestion.
Gotta come up to the
I'm
mic.
sorry, Rich. Yeah, Rich Goins, 1821 Stark Lane. One of the things that saved us was our neighbor calling us about seeing something related to a fire. And that was because we had a system in our neighborhood, which was really effective, where at least 4 families that were disabled, limited, could call our resident under a certain, like a 1, automatically would go to our residents. So that allowed us to go out, see what was happening, take care of them, and have also retired CDF people coming down to help us in our neighborhood. What we're trying to do, at least at this point, we all are a very close neighborhood. We share information with each other. We meet together. And the next level now is sharing numbers with each other about residents, so we have an identified family to call in case of an emergency. For example, we had 3 houses down, a person called, said, this is the Clark family. Everyone knows them. And they said, Rich, we understand there's an emergency, what's going on? So fortunately, because I was part of EOC at the time, and had got that on my phone, I was able to convey to them what's going on as you grab everything in your home and you get out immediately, because even EOC staff were not involved. They were just told to leave town. We weren't going to be meeting about logistics or anything else like that. I like the idea of something internally in residence, and I think that's workable, at least in our neighborhood. At least you have to ask your neighbor, you have to implement something, somebody to coordinate it. And I recommend that. It was a saving thing for us. Or if because the fire that was identified was at the beginning of Stark Lane, if it got any worse, we would have been blocked in. There was no evacuation route. The 2 that were, or 1 that was available, was not available. Even the person who owned that property got on one family for using it with children to get out. It was that type of thing. And we would have been heartbroken. We lost everything anyway, but we could have lost our lives. Just that simple. Input.
Thanks, Rich.
And Richard, that's a great point. I appreciate it, because so many times people look at government to take care of all the problems.
Oh, no, we can't.
And
No way.
we need to be community in our neighborhoods and everything else, and work
Yep.
with each other. That's the best. We're gonna do our best to do what we can here, but we gotta work together as community and as neighborhoods to help each other. So, perfect, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Neighbor helping neighbor is the history of our country.
And we
That's a good
gotta, I
thing.
think that, the towers are great, it was an add-on, but all these other things, I mean, now that we're at 10,000 people, I don't know if we've got a new town resident package. I don't know if we have any kind of put together thing with like Code Red, with all of the stuff, because we live in the forest. I mean, I don't know, what are we doing we the town, through fire and everybody, to educate our residents of
I know we had
what's
packages,
available?
I know we had packages we handed out on the Party in the Park with all
With the
kinds of.
map.
With the map and also information about, what.
I didn't say anything about Code Red or that, so,
There were flyers like that, I believe. Yeah, go, let's tell them.
were there?
Yeah, we've given those out many times, but there is always more that we can do
Yeah.
You
to
can't
let
over-
people
you can't
know.
enough, no
Right,
question.
absolutely. And I would like Brian to talk a little bit more about that kind of third option of kind of augmenting the towers to add additional technology. So do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, just so it's something you're thinking about as we move forward towards the handoff of the system and whether or not we want to move forward with other options. There is an option we can add to the towers. It's called a mesh network. What that would allow the towers to do is actually create a network over the entire town that would connect to a mobile device that any resident could have in their home, or it could connect to an app on a telephone. The device for the home is about a $75 device. It plugs into an outlet, looks like almost like a CO2 sensor monitor. In the event of the tower being activated, the network on the towers would activate that remote plug-in thing in a home. It's battery powered for 24 hours. In the event of an emergency, you could pull it off the wall and get in your car and continue to get alerts in your car while you're holding the thing.
Audio alerts, voice alerts, what do you?
It would get the voice alerts from the tower and the siren alerts. Additionally, that mesh would connect into the app, if we had the app that was built for it, which would mean in a situation like the campfire where all cell systems are down and we're driving through town with our phone, it would connect to the tower and still get messages.
Is that app available
and so-
without the devices?
Yes, they're separate, two separate things that connect to the same
So
network.
You
So-
should go back to this with the cost.
So yeah, exactly. So that's a third option if we feel like, we want to supplement further the ability to warn our community.
Grant
So,
money and give everybody in town.
well, we could potentially fold it into the existing grant budget, but,
Well,
so,
the app, wouldn't the app be a free download? And-
Yes.
Okay, so the
Cool.
your residents don't have to pay anything, we just would have to pay to put the mesh network up.
correct. We put the mesh network up, residents would pay, or we'd figure out a way to supplement through a grant program, the $75, $100 plug-in.
But the app, you could just download.
Correct.
To your phone.
Well, we
Correct.
should-
So
we should-
that's something that Colette and I are happy to look further into and get more concrete numbers and come back in the future.
That'd be good.
Consider
So-
that direction,
So-
to get that information back to
We
us.
thought you'd be excited about it, that's why I wanted to share.
That will be something we can present to you when this is a completed project, and we have all of that
Yeah.
data that we were talking
Right.
about, the
I
sequential
know.
testing, and
Cool.
all of that information, we'll present that to you alongside that information
that's
as well.
That's a good option. That's a good deal. Solve something.
So just two other questions. So the mesh, I use something similar to that on my website, or not website, but my, I can't even think.
First word, second syllable.
I know. Anyway, for my internet, to expand my internet. And it works really well, and so I'm curious as to what the price will be on that. And then the second thing is on these towers, what are we looking at now? Do we have an idea about what the approximate price is for each tower?
Yes, so the only factor we don't know right now is the PG&E costs for the monthly electricity for the towers, but the towers are, they take about as much as a plug-in phone in terms of power from PG&E, so that should be a low cost. The satellite and cell phone fees are about $61 a month per tower, so times 21, and then we'll have the electricity on top of that.
Is that what you're asking for, Councilmember Tran? Are you asking for the
sorry.
actual construction
The actual-
installation
so
cost? of
On
the-
option one is to put more towers.
Oh, sorry.
So I'm looking at what.
Got it.
Do we know now what our total price is for this?
Sorry, I thought you meant the ongoing monthly costs moving forward per tower.
Even though it's good information,
Yeah.
so thank you for that, but my question was about what does each tower cost us?
It's, the entire construction of the 21 towers is about 1.6 million. And so it's hard to break it down necessarily to a per tower, because there's kind of an exponential growth.
Land is about 100.
Yeah, exactly. And, here, we were really lucky with HQE that we signed an all-inclusive contract, because there is no way this company is making money on this project. This was supposed to be a much quicker, easier process. So I'm really grateful for their partnership in this. And so the whole project right now is at 1.6 million.
So 21 towers, 1.6 million. So if we were to have to put in additional towers, let's say, I was just sort of looking at about what we think that price would be, so.
Yeah, I could get that for you. It's all so spread out over all the different components. It's a little hard
Is
to,
PG&E working with us to come up?
yes.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
Anything else from council? Okay, thank you Colette, appreciate it. Yeah. Let's move on to 1G, the campfire updates, written reports. The first one's from Colette Curtis, Recovery and Economic Development Director. You're up, Colette.
Nothing.
Nothing. Oh, are there any questions? All right, moving on to the next one, Mark Maddox. Public Works Director, was any questions from Mark's report?
No.
Okay. Tony Lindsay, any questions for his report? I was waiting for the no, okay. And then last one, Kate Anderson's report, any questions on that one?
No, she always does good.
I know. Okay, let's move on to the consent calendar. What's the wish of the council?
I would like to pull item 2C off the consent calendar to talk about.
Okay.
Move approval of everything but 2C.
I'd like to,
Okay.
second.
Move in second. Need a vote?
Hold on here. Okay, motion by Bolin, seconded by Culleton, to approve the consent calendar item with item 2C removed from the consent calendar. Roll call vote, Vice Mayor Bolin.
Aye.
Councilmember Crowder is absent. Councilmember Culleton.
Aye.
Councilmember Tryon.
Aye.
And Mayor Lassonde.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, let's move on to item 2C.
Okay, I asked you to pull this off because I talked with Tony about it, and when I read this, a couple things. Number one is, we're gonna spend, this is something, a grant we got approved in 2019, and we didn't get the money until recently. And so it's to hire 3 more employees to go out, and 2 of them to go out and write tickets for people that have weeds that are taller than 4 inches. And when I read the thing, so the town out of general fund or somewhere is gonna have to come up with $170-some thousand. And my concern with this was, when we hire an employee, even though this is a 30-month contract, if and when those people, whether they're qualified, whether they come from a PERS vested employment or they go beyond the 30 months to another job in the PERS program, there's a legacy cost to the town for once they ever retire. You know, we don't know who these people are. We don't know if they will be PERS. And I just think that when we get staff reports, I would like it, if nothing else, even if that's a number we can't quantify because of all the unknowns, I think our reports should at least let us know, so as we make decisions, that there is possibly other costs that we're not looking at. I did ask Tony today, is it going to mean buying another truck? Is it going to mean buying another, because the grant funds pay for a lot of that stuff. It will mean buying some laptops or some tablets and stuff. But, you know, because I'm an advocate of using contractors whenever we can, so that we're not adding to our unfunded liability in the future. You know, I was on the council when we were about to go broke, and we've gotten a lot of reports about the economy and our long-term, you know, investment portfolio and all that stuff. And last year, we were all concerned that the money was going to run out within 10 years or something. And so whenever we're adding employees, I want to know what are the real costs, or at least be aware when I make a decision that there's liable to be costs to a council 10 or 15 years from now, when we add these part-time people under grants. To me, I know of one property that's on Wagstaff that is covered in Scotch broom, which is highly flammable. It's 4 or 5 feet tall. It's been there for 5 years. And in talking to Tony today, I found out that if you file a complaint about your neighbor's property that has weeds, and your insurance is being jeopardized because of the condition of that vacant lot next to you, and you complain to the town, we'll send somebody out there, and we'll send them a letter, and then a month later we'll send them a citation, and it takes about 5 months of our process before that gets sent to the town attorney so that we can try to abate that problem. So it's taking anywhere from 6 to 10 months to clean up a lot. And Tony told me today that so far with weed abatements, we've only cleaned 3 lots. You know, so I just wanted the council, if we're going to make a decision, to understand that when we hire employees under grant programs and we have to put up general fund money to meet our match, oftentimes there's the possibility that there's legacy cost to the town of Paradise in the future. And as long as we're aware that we're obligating future councils to that, then we can move forward. I just wanted to bring that up. My other harebrained idea is that rather than hire 3 people to write more tickets so that we just have a bigger list of non-compliant properties, if we can afford $170,000 to do that, let's take that $170,000 and let's ratchet up and clean up the lots that we already have on the books that are out of compliance and have been for years, and clean them up. Because just writing more tickets doesn't eliminate the problem. Now, to Tony's credit, when people get a ticket finally, a lot of times they will clean up their lot.
Yeah.
And once it gets ratcheted up to the town attorney to send them a threatening letter about abatement, they seem to be able to find the way and the means to clean up their lot. So I'm not against this. I may never pull it off the agenda, because I wanted to make sure that everybody understands that when we approve some of these things with these grant funds, we sometimes are obligating future councils to expenditures. And that might be the case in this case. And with that, I'll shut up.
So, Mr. Lindsay, just a quick question. When you were looking at this, did you evaluate whether 4-leaf was an option and get to the determination that it was better to hire employees versus hiring 4-leaf as a contractor?
Well, we have the option of doing 8 other contractors. So, but the contract cost is double the amount that it would cost for it on.
Thank you.
Yep.
We have a card.
Very good.
You got a card on that one?
Yes, Ward Habriel?
Thank you. I think pulling it off the agenda is a good idea. Most people's problem is they do not have a clear understanding of what you expect of them. You know, a clean lot for you may be different than a clean lot for you and for me. And frankly, I have had personal experience with people around me, neighbors, that don't comply, and yet they've done just enough so that the letter has been satisfied. And yet, you could easily start a fire there, and there's a whole lot of fuel to burn there. And there are several properties that have been that way for a very long time. And yet, you want the properties to be clean, you want them to not be a hazard, and yet some people just flat out know they can get away with it. My personal example is when I'm helping my neighbor getting his property cleared before he can sell it, which is a pretty big deal. It's a little over an acre. But between him and I, my tractor and his trailer and et cetera, we can get it done pretty well. But we maxed out that trailer with everything we could get in except for one log. Cal Fire shows up. Oh, he's not here tonight. He shows up and I catch him going there because it's only 1 block from me. I catch him and I said, well, what did you think? And he goes, well, it's pretty good, but you missed a log. I said, we didn't miss it. We couldn't get it on the trailer. He said, well, there's another log there. And I said, you know, 4 blocks down the street, there's over 100 logs on one piece of property, and it's been that way for many, many years. Don't come here and complain to me about the job that my neighbor and I did cleaning his property, and it is slicker than anything else on this street, and complain about 1 log when there are dozens and dozens and dozens of them 4 blocks down the street. And they are still there to this day, and everybody in Cal Fire, including people that live at the rental house on that corner of Merrill and Pence, know that there are dozens and dozens and dozens of logs laying on that property. Unfair and unequitable treatment to the people of the town is one of the worst things that you can do. A fair and equitable treatment for everybody is understandable, but unfair? No. You lose a lot of credibility with us. Thank you for your time.
Any other cards?
That was my only card.
I've seen a lot of people ask for help, and people came out and they talked to them and went through it with them, so I don't understand what was even said there. But moving forward, I understand your point, and I don't like hiring more people too, but we got a grant and we get the ability to do it. There's ways of those people being infiltrated into
Right.
other positions as people, attrition and those type things happen. I was here too when we were
Yeah.
going bankrupt
Yeah.
because we had too many people. And I agree with you. The hard part for me is we get these grants, we have to perform. I was on the phone with several of different entities guaranteeing them, if we give you this money, will you be able to perform? And I said, yes, we will. And we have to, or we're gonna lose it.
Lose credibility.
Yeah, and we will lose that credibility when it comes up next time we put up for a grant. So I agree with you, but
Yeah.
I don't see how we cannot move forward.
Well, I'm meeting with Tony today, I mean, he explained to me, because my first concern was that, like this legacy cost. But he explained that through attrition and one thing or another, so the way I was thinking, it was, oh my gosh, I'm paying for my guy and then I'm paying for somebody that's gone. You know, no, it's not necessarily like that.
No.
But the other point he made that was really good was, and you can look at it in his report and the numbers that he gives us, the letters that they send out from code enforcement, the citations they send out, it's bringing about compliance. There's hundreds and hundreds of properties that are coming into compliance. So
Yes.
that's why I told him, it's okay, well, I'm not gonna push for my screwy idea, you know, but I just wanted to make sure that, and I appreciate the fact that you share that concern and see that.
Yes.
They're doing a good job, so.
Right.
You wanna make a motion, or you mean?
Want to make a motion?
I'll make the motion to approve item 2C.
Second.
Motion by Colleton, second by Boland to approve consent calendar item 2C. Roll call vote, Vice Mayor Boland.
Aye.
Councilmember Crowder is absent. Councilmember Colleton.
Aye.
Councilmember Tryon. Aye. And Mayor Lassonde.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Item 4, public communications. These are for matters not on the council business agenda. Speakers are allowed to speak for 3 minutes to address the council. Council is prohibited from taking action. So do we have anybody?
I have cards on this.
Okay.
The first one is Ward Habriel.
Good evening again. I forgot to say so earlier, Happy New Year to you. I know that the town is also good at publicity for other agencies. This is the yearly flyer for the Butte County Fire Safe Council. And one of the things that I'm trying to do is help people see that sometimes we have to adjust some of these dates, especially when they're some months off. So when you look at this and you think, oh my gosh, they got that brand new office, we're going to go to the open house next week. No, we've postponed it to February. We got several other things coming up. But we are also looking for more opportunities for more other influential people in town to attend some of our regular Butte County Fire Safe Council annual and monthly meetings. Councilmember Tryon did last week, and we very, very much appreciate having representatives like that attend our meetings to see what it is that we do as a county agency that frankly is financed better than the one in the state, and operates under the grants that have been given to us to do several $1 million worth of forestry fire prevention work that has not been done before for roughly 40 years. All of the failures from the U.S. Forest Service are now under our authority to get that corrected. And we're doing everything we possibly can to get the right contractors to do it and to get it done right and make our community safer. Not just here, but all around our Ridge community. We're working to be able to do that. And the contractors we're getting, they're doing a phenomenal job. We are safer now than we've been for many, many years, and so are several other communities in our county. Thanks to the Butte County Fire Safe Council. But thank you, Councilmember Tryon, for attending our meeting.
The next card is from Rich Gowans.
Thanks again. You've heard from me once. I want to thank you for the opportunity to just stand in front of you. And a little bit more positive approach, wish you a Happy New Year. A successful one and one you're going to look back on and really feel proud about. I want to thank you for sending Steve to Washington. It's a cost savings for us. We need a spokesman there to complement what Doug is doing for us. I also want to thank the council, the Butte Fire Safe Council. They come out, economically saved my family and I in our rebuild quite a bit of money and took trees out. And they did a great job, which we really appreciated. I'm glad you passed the thing that Tony presented and getting new staff, because that ensures that, like we ran into in our area, that private roads are open for evacuation. And also an issue I'm having now, another issue, I'm going to be meeting with my neighbor. We have an out-of-town landowner and an in-town, and the debris on the easement that they own is affecting where our home is, and we want to make sure that it's safe for us as well as them too. And we're dealing with that, and I'm glad we're going to have continued code people as well as new people. I want to encourage that you continue to provide pertinent information to new residents and landowners in conjunction with any information provided by escrow, mortgage, real estate, or county offices when it comes to living on a private road. Probably the last 4 of the 5 people on our road alone did not know they weren't provided documentation, they didn't know they were on a private road, and they didn't know, after I was smiling about who was going to repair the road, that they were part of that opportunity and responsibility. Please continue to do whatever you can on that. Also, if you would, I'd like to see you continue to provide current information on areas that are considered geographically high water or storm drain alley properties. We ran into a number of issues related to that. We finally got it resolved. It cost us, but I'm glad there's pertinent current information out for landowners. And also, provide information for any legal judgments that impact private roads. Stark Lane is under a court judgment and settlement. Not too many people know about it. It's still pertinent, and it had both its positive and negative problems during 2023. And also, any special permits that are issued by the town, especially if public owners or the public is going to use our road, that we know about it on private roads, what's going to take place, when it's going to take place, and the communication is really there. Just continue to share information like you have. Thank you.
The next card is from Fred Abler. Did he?
Fred left.
I think he left. All right.
Last card?
That was my last card.
All right, let's move. Item 5, public hearings.
Quick,
This is-
just a quick comment to what he said. Mark, isn't there like a storm drain map on our website? Okay. If that is an answer to your question.
That, oh, he said there was. He
That,
was pretty-
Okay.
that has went through a 3-step process, because we basically are building on a part of our property because we were told where our original house was, we couldn't build. And then it turned up that we could, and then also our neighbor was told he wasn't gonna be able to build. He looked at it very, very thoroughly, got the information at the time, and then sold his property because of what he was informed about. And then my new neighbor comes in right after Derek left, put in a septic, and told us all together different. The original maps versus the current maps.
There was some
different.
updates done.
Yeah, so just
Okay,
continue to be current and provide that.
Thank you.
Please.
Moving on to item 5, public hearings. This is for items that require published legal notice and mail notice. Procedure will be, we'll have the staff report, then I'll open up that for public comment on the project proponents, then project opponents, and any rebuttals, and then I'll close the hearing and allow the council to debate. So if we could have the staff report, please.
Good evening, council. It's that time of year again for CDBG annual plan. Staff would asks that you conduct this public hearing to solicit comments and suggestions regarding the 24-25 annual action plan. In addition, to approve the formation of a public services subcommittee to consider input and requests for public service funding, as well as appoint 2 council members to the public services subcommittee. So the town has been an entitlement city since 1994. Entitlement communities develop their own programs and funding priorities. However, priority is given to those projects that benefit low and moderate income persons. As part of the CDBG annual plan process, the town council may elect to, but is not required to, allocate up to 15% of the program year funding for public service agencies. The agencies must be legal nonprofit organizations that provide services to low and moderate income residents. The annual plan for this current year, the amount received is $100,000 for 23-24, and we anticipate that to be for next year. And over the next few months, staff will prepare a draft annual plan. The plan will be available for the public viewing and comment prior to the adoption by council and prior to submission to HUD. So today's public hearing is to solicit comments and get the subrecipient committee. The subrecipient applications are available right now on the town's website. The deadline is January 22nd for those subrecipient applications. The subrecipient committee will meet through February reviewing those. March will be for drafting the plan. We'll publish the plan March 8th for public comment, and then bring it back to council in April for review of the draft and finalizing the plan. That's it.
Okay, so is there anybody that we have cards for this? How does this work?
Open
it up.
Open the public hearing.
Open up the meeting for public comment. I'm looking for anybody that wishes to state that they're a proponent for what was just discussed. Okay, anybody against it? Okay, I'm going to close the meeting, this particular one. Okay? Comments from the council? Okay.
I'm speechless.
Speechless, all right. So we're down to appoint 2 council members, approve the formation, and then appoint 2 council members. So
Is this the thing where we give money to like Boys and Girls Club and different groups like that?
Yep.
Yeah, it's a cool deal.
I nominate Woody.
I'm not 2 people in spite of what some of you think.
well, you know what happens when somebody's not here, right?
That's what I was thinking.
I was thinking the same thing.
Okay, so I would nominate Steve Crowder.
Second.
Does that work?
So how about you agree to be on the subcommittee, and if Steve Crowder agrees to be on the subcommittee, then the 2 of you could be on the committee. Does that work?
Yeah, he chose to be.
It's a lot softer landing.
He chose to be by not being here. That's how that works.
Need a roll
Vice
call.
Mayor said so.
Do we need a roll call vote on this, Dina?
So we just need council concurrence, I believe. Is that right,
I think I
Scott?
got concurrence, yes. I see
Okay.
a smile over on.
So, okay.
Let me call Steve real quick.
All right, let's close that. Let's move on to council consideration, item 6A. That's to discuss and consider adopting a Town of Paradise ordinance number 632.
Good evening, council.
We got.
It's okay. And there's only a couple slides, so I'll just cue you. Thank you. All right, well, good evening, council. So since its initial adoption in December 2018 and subsequent revisions, the urgency ordinance concerning interim housing is set to expire April 30th this year. With less than 4 months remaining, it's imperative to contemplate transitioning to align with the town's intent behind the urgency ordinance, which was to assist our citizens transitioning to permanent housing. It's magic. So, staff makes these recommendations, the following changes: to amend the ordinance to allow citizens to occupy or authorized sites until April 30th, 2025. According to the most recent audit conducted by staff, out of 145 permitted sites, now I want to tell you, the 145 current sites were out of 598 that were initially issued, right? So out of those 145 permitted sites, currently, only 58 are occupied by residents. So it really was a great assist. Additionally, upon the town's request or annually, introduce a requirement for individuals to submit verification confirming their utilities' current existence, and that's water, electricity, and garbage collection. Staff recommends, thirdly, to allow the temporary storage of up to 2 unoccupied recreational vehicles on eligible property to expire. And that would they expire this year, April 30th, 2024. Based on latest staff audit, among the 65 approved RV storage sites, only 51 have RVs stored on them. And then amend the ordinance to revoke permits for occupied or designated storage sites that are not occupied and do not have an RV situated on the property, and they're not occupied. There's vacant sites. And combined between the vacant storage sites and the permitted sites, there's 74 out there that are just vacant. Nothing's there. So what does this mean for residents, right? So residents holding a temporary use permit as per the revised ordinance may continue to reside on the property past the original expiration date and would be allowed to remain until April 30th of 25. The temporary use permit recipients under the urgency ordinance must annually or requested by the town furnish updated utility verification. Implementing this requirement will help prevent any health and safety issues associated with occupying substandard conditions. The parcels that have been issued temporary use permits for storage on designated parcels will expire, right? So those permits will expire, and it's imperative that those RVs situated on those parcels be removed by that date. And lastly, the temporary use permits for vacant parcels that have been issued but remain unoccupied by citizens or RVs, there's vacant sites, will be revoked upon the council approval. And that concludes. If I have available for any questions.
You can go back. So you say, introduce a requirement for individuals to submit verification confirming their utilities. You talk about water, electricity, garbage collection.
Correct.
We're not talking about sewer.
Well, sewer, there's no bill for that, right? So every RV is required to be hooked up to septic.
Okay, is that something we should put in here, that is a requirement, just so it's clear in this?
Oh, that's already a requirement in the code, but we can certainly.
It is separately outlined in the code that is necessary as part of compliance with the permit.
Okay.
You can't get a permit without it, number one. Number two.
Okay, so it doesn't need to be in this.
Yeah, this is just sort of a summary, just.
Okay, good, thank you.
This is the flash,
It's flashing, yeah.
So on your ordinance on page 2, which would be our agenda packet number 45, up on your first paragraph, it says, current water, solid waste, and/or electric company. Shouldn't that be and not have an or there?
We can certainly strike the or, certainly. Yes. Sure, and then.
Yeah, if you would like, the reason why we included or is because if, for example, someone was on a well, they wouldn't have a PID
But the way this reads, if that or makes it read that they can submit one of those instead of all of those.
Yeah, and I would agree, if you'd like to strike the word "or," that would be appropriate, and.
I'm not trying to be picky, but
Yeah,
it's a loophole, a huge one.
That way, again, that way, if one of these doesn't apply, then it doesn't matter, that's fine, yeah.
Because some people in the beginning have water tanks.
Well, yeah, we don't allow that now. do we?
Yeah.
No, but I'm just
Right.
saying, with the orange.
But you guys would have the freedom, if someone had a well, you'd have the freedom to say, we're fine, you got water.
Of course, they have
Fine with that.
potable water source.
Right.
Right.
Okay. All right, good.
Any other questions from the Dennis? Tina, do we have any cards on this?
I have no cards on this item.
Do I hear a motion?
Move approval for item 6A.
Second.
Now, does that, let me ask, does your approval include the modification to eliminate the word
I
"or"?
move approval of item 6A with the modification removing the word "or." O-A-R.
No.
Different kind of an "or."
I second that.
All right. Motion by Culleton, seconded by Bolin, to adopt Town of Paradise Ordinance Number 632, an ordinance repealing urgency ordinance number 624, and adopting new ordinance relating to interim housing, accessory buildings, and unoccupied recreational vehicles inside the campfire area. Roll call vote, Vice Mayor Bolin?
Aye.
Councilmember Crowder is absent. Councilmember Culleton?
Aye.
Councilmember Tryon?
Aye.
And Mayor Lasson.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion passes.
All right, we'll move on to item 6B, to discuss and consider waiving the first reading of town ordinance number 633 and read by title only, and introduce town ordinance number 633, an ordinance amending the Paradise Municipal Code.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. This is, burn permits provide guidelines and metrics to those who desire to utilize a controlled burn to eliminate organic material on their property in a safe way and without the risk of causing damage or peril to others in the surrounding area. The modifications that are proposed, we've worked with the fire chief and the fire department these will provide some clarity as to who may approve or deny a burn permit, as well as to impose some reasonable conditions on the burning of debris. Further, these modifications will clarify that a burn permit may be revoked in the event of non-compliance with the conditions. If someone has a burn permit and they're not complying with it, then it gives criteria as to revoking those permits. There are some, the ordinance modification makes several non-material changes that are intended to just clarify some of the provisions, clean up some of the provisions, and add some detail as to the process and the conditions. I can certainly go through those if you like, but it really just sort of tightens up the burn permit process and gives the ability for staff to make sure that people who are utilizing the burn permit process to get rid of organic material are doing it in a safe and effective way.
Questions on council?
Thank you for doing this.
No. Thank you for tightening it up.
So, I'm just, a question on page 5 of 7, our agenda, page number 55. In the appeal process, it appears that they're appealing back to the person who denied it. And since the ban is a 1-year ban on burning, do they have any other options for their appeal, or anyone else that they can go to appeal?
No, actually, the appeal of the administrative citation, I believe chapter 1.09, let me look that up.
Okay.
I thought that was an appeal with an administrative hearing officer, if I remember correctly. Let me look.
Okay, because it looked like, from what I saw, that they're appealing back to the fire marshal. So I may have missed that one. I apologize.
Let me pull up 1.09 real quick here.
Jeopardy music.
Yeah, 1.09 is an administrative appeal with a hearing officer. An administrative hearing officer would be utilized.
Okay.
So it would not be the same person.
Okay.
And we have a contract with an outside attorney who sits as the administrative hearing officer.
Perfect, thank you for that clarification.
Any other questions? Do we hear a motion?
You have no
Oh,
cards?
sorry, cards.
No cards?
Motion that we approve the
Second.
new ordinance amending Paradise Municipal Code.
Second.
Motion by Boland, seconded by Culleton, to waive the first reading of Town Ordinance Number 633 and read by title only, and introduce Town Ordinance Number 633, an ordinance amending Paradise Municipal Code, Chapter 115.09, relating to the fire code and burn permits.
That's what I said.
Roll call vote, Vice Mayor Boland.
Aye.
Councilmember Crowder is absent. Councilmember Culleton.
Aye.
Councilmember Tryon. Aye. And Mayor Lassonde.
Aye.
This is the first reading of the ordinance. It will come back on the consent calendar at the next meeting and then go into effect 30 days after that.
We move on to item 6C.
Thank you for the work you guys put into that.
Yeah. Consider adopting resolution number 2024-01.
01.
Okay, there's a resolution of Town Council of Town Paradise accepting the work performed under the Almond Street Multimodal Improvement Project and Gap Closure Complex.
All right, good evening, Mayor Lassonde, Council. Thank you for your time this evening to discuss a critical project that recently came to completion. So back in, I believe, 2016, we awarded the Almond Street Multimodal Improvements Project. In 2017, we were awarded the Gap Closure Complex Project. Both are similar in scope to add curb gutter sidewalks and bike lanes and bike paths, lighting and landscaping in the downtown along Birch for Almond, Foster, Black Olive. And so with that, council awarded a contract in February 9th of 2021 after 2 unsuccessful advertisements to Knife River Construction in the amount of their base bid of $5.9 million and approved contingency expenditures not exceeding 10%. Construction efforts began March 22nd of 2021, and the project was substantially complete on December 31st, 2023. The total estimated project cost at the time of construction contract award, including a 10% contingency, was $7.7 million. Current project expenditures are now estimated at $9.99 million, a 29% cost higher than anticipated. Actual expenditures exceeded project costs by $2.2 million and are due to numerous setbacks associated with the campfire recovery, availability of materials, our own dig once utility policy, as well as several design issues that we encountered during the project itself. On the second page of the staff report included in this agenda item includes a very robust breakdown of the project costs between what is funded through our state active transportation program grants, supplemental grants that we secured during the course of construction, which is why the contract amount was increased, as well as the congestion mitigation air quality grant that is allocated between both projects. And I'd love to take this opportunity to recognize Jessica Erdahl, our supervising project manager, who has done a phenomenal job in managing these two projects as well as their 50 to 70 bid items. There's, as you can see in this table, costs that are attributed to insurance. There's costs attributed to the grants, some items that are participating towards that grant and some that are non-participating. And so between these four tables, all of the project phases are broken down with their reimbursement ratios and what the funding sources are. All told, the overall budget for our project and funds that we've secured is over by $75,000, and we are proposing to make those project costs whole through utilizing a budget transfer from our local transportation fund, which is an account that is processed through Butte County Association of Governments and operation of the B-Line that's really meant for bike and pedestrian related projects. The project, again, is complete and part of our overall long-range picture in making a downtown and vibrant community, or a vibrant downtown community for our recovering population. With that, I'd be glad to answer any questions the council might have.
Questions from the council? Hearing none. Cards on that?
No cards?
Real quick, this has nothing to do with our ongoing issues, right? This is just closing up the whole thing and
This is the,
ending the project.
this is the ability to close the construction contract
Right.
with Knife River Construction
Right.
so that they're able to release bonds
Right.
and close the project on the books with that.
Perfect.
Yep.
Good, thank you.
I will have to pass on a comment received from one of the members of our community. He said, "The roads look so nice, but there's all these dirt lots. What's the plan?"
Yeah.
I had to explain a little bit about the sewer and all that. They were very pleased with the nice little light towers and the landscaping and all that, but there's just nothing happening down there, so they were wondering, what's the long-range plan for that?
Yep, we're excited.
Yeah.
Future is bright.
Yeah.
No cards? Move approval?
I heard a motion, do I hear a second?
Second.
Motion by Bolin, seconded by Colleton, to adopt Resolution 2024-01, accepting the work performed under the Almond Street Multimodal Improvement Project and Gap Closure Complex Project Contract 16-01 Con and 17-04 Con performed by Baldwin Contracting Company, Inc., DBA Knife River Construction. Roll call vote. Councilmember Bolin?
Aye.
Councilmember Crowder is absent. Councilmember Colleton?
Aye.
Councilmember Tryon? Aye. And Mayor Lasan?
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to item 6D, discuss and consider adopting resolution number 2024-02, resolution of the Town Council, Town of Paradise, approving the Town Paradise Wildland Fire Evacuation Traffic Control Plan.
All right, thank you, Mayor Lasan. I will be presenting this item as well. This document is really an internal focused document that comes before the council anytime that there's made significant updates that's occurred since its inception in the early 2000s and updates, I believe, in 2013 and 14, and is a complement to the external public-facing maps and information provided by the Butte Fire Safe Council in our most recent publication for Ready, Set, Go evacuation plan. So with this update, we are able to coordinate, we were able to coordinate with CAL FIRE, with Paradise Police Department, and incorporate other items that were part of our transportation master plan, enhancing coordination and feedback that we received from CHP, Butte County Sheriffs, City of Chico, Butte County, Public Works, and others. And so this is really a culmination of a lot of information that went into those efforts, and I have it here included in the agenda packet. I'm just going to scroll through it for a couple of highlights. Again, this internal document has our evacuation goals and our overall traffic control program objectives. Again, properly planning evacuation routes in order to provide the best balance of flow and eliminate or minimize gridlock. And again, 9 other ones further. And so again, that's enhanced with our strategies of how we make that happen. And then what's really most new about this evacuation traffic control plan is what we're calling evacuation scenario mapping. This includes 7 predefined scenarios which represent potential wildland fire threats of varying magnitude. The threats identified in purple are not synonymous with evacuation orders, but are intended to simulate a potential developing incident, allowing for pre-planning of critical evacuation routes, potential one-way evacuation routes, in addition for routes of incoming resources. Each of these scenarios, based on the incident, may necessitate an all-at-once evacuation of the entire town of Paradise or Ridge, and the scenarios are here listed below, but I'll just go ahead and focus on the first one for an example of the room here. So this event simulates something that would originate in Butte Creek Canyon heading towards the town of Paradise. And so an event like this, we are able to, in this pre-planning process, try and identify what are the decisions that we can make today under blue skies or even cloudy, rainy ones, that if we had a fire that looked like this, what would our strategies be for evacuation, and what would our strategies be for resources, and where could we need to use contraflow or one-way evacuation out? So this one would allow where we might focus on resources using Skyway because it's so close to the threat. We don't want to be sending traffic through Skyway where the fire is coming from. And then we evaluate and identify Neal, Clark, and Pence as our main evacuation routes, with potentially using Pence as for a one-way evacuation egress route. So our other scenarios kind of go through each different one, and you'll see they kind of represent a major incident approaching from a different geographic direction. So from the southern part of town, from the kind of southeast part, one that's very similar to the 2018 Camp Fire, this West Branch Concow scenario, where we could use and did use contraflow in evacuation, but this kind of memorializes it a little bit further. And obviously also the top of town is a potential threat as well. And even one that, an incident that could originate in the center of town, where again, we're sending traffic north, we're sending traffic south, Neal, Clark, as well as Pence Road. So
are they actually using Honey Run as an evacuation?
No, none of these include Honey Run as an evacuation route.
So that branch there is Skyway branch?
Yeah, that's Skyway because it has, it's showing the bidirectional nature for the split there. That's why there's multiple arrows. Please, in the event of emergency, do not use Honey Run for evacuation.
What's that?
Oh, please don't use Honey Run for evacuation.
Well, no, but that might get them off the dime to.
It might.
Get them to improve it so that it's.
Yeah.
Yep.
So with that, then the document includes our traditional evacuation zone mapping. Again, just as was the case in the last update, these plans are not intended to represent a plan of action for only evacuating the specific zone identified. Moreover, they're to be used as a lead zone for a broader incident with a common objective and strategy of the individual zone itself. And so with that, we also understand we're doing a lot about publicizing information about our evacuation zones, but here is a pre-canned description in writing. You know, graphics and maps are great, but there are some people that just want to know, I need to know in writing, and sometimes media too, this can supplement our outreach, that we're evacuating zone 1. What does that mean? Well, it includes all properties north of Billy Road, west of Paradise Memorial Trailway, and south of adjacent northerly town limit, and the roads that are included in there. And so that's just their way to go in the document, and can be used for media outreach or Code Red or
And the county did that too, right?
Yes, the county has information about theirs, and they have identified a number for every zone, similar to that the towns had for quite some time.
Right.
So here's an example of a specific zone, and what the goal of this document does is it helps us, again, describe the zone kind of in general, in detail, and then the priority intersections of where we send resources first based on this kind of leading zone scenario. So for this zone 1, Northwest Paradise, Little Butte Creek Canyon, Skyway, Billy Trailway, our priority is going to be closing traffic maybe at access points from Magalia if necessary, but our primary traffic control objectives are going to be Skyway and Pence, closing southbound Skyways, diverting to southbound Pence. What's going to be needed? We know we're going to need some law enforcement present, or at least 2 VIPs. What type of resources, signage, cones, and the like. And so it matches the corresponding map that prioritizes those intersections for that area. And when you read this printed, and it's provided to all police officers and all vehicles, it reads like an open book with the details on the left and the map on the right. So you're looking at both double-sided to correlate the geographic area being evacuated as well as the priorities that we're looking to. So that in general is repeated for all 14 zones in this document. And we're grateful for the efforts and coordination of all the jurisdictions that put their time into this. And there are no financial impacts with our adoption. We're just asking council to concur and have this one replace our pre-Camp Fire document. This will correlate with and is consistent with our evacuation sign zone project, which I will mention should be under construction here at the end of the month or early February, to really tie in and help people understand where their zones are, so that they're ready when we issue an evacuation order for zone 12, like shown on this map, that they know that means Clark Road between town limits and Pearson. So with that, I'd be glad to answer any other questions.
I know we need to do this. I mean, there's something that needs to happen. Would this have changed anything? Would this document change anything if you had it with the campfire?
So that's a great question.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like it's something we have to do because we have to do it to get grants, we have to do it to move forward with our plans and everything, but.
This is all about documenting the individual zones and defining what are the worst case scenarios that we could foresee, and what our potential responses and how many decisions could be made in advance of understanding what
Got
the
it.
worst-case scenario is.
But are we gonna go back to this book? If there's a fire, are we gonna go back to this book and look?
Well,
Are we just gonna?
what's great is that the people responsible for implementing this book have it. It's here, and they're trained on it, and we practice on it. This is the formal documentation that we can refer to, and we do have the book, and it will go in the squad vehicles. But it provides a common operating picture for everyone responding to that incident. So that's a critical resource for us to have. This is a part of our update, incorporating lessons learned about our regional coordination and resources.
So I would encourage you to, if it's gonna stay there, it's only gonna stay there if we have the same people that continually look at this.
Yep.
And we bring new people up to speed. Otherwise, it's a resource we're gonna lose. And that's something that's constant training, and I know you know that.
Yeah.
But, you know, if this is gonna be something that's there, we know it, because we're not gonna come back to the book. I know we're not gonna come back to the book and look at it. We're gonna do what we gotta do at that moment. But we gotta have the people that have that in their head. This is what I do. I know what happens in this scenario.
Yep. Well, we do train on it. We had our tabletop exercise in June of last year, and we have more. That was a very large event involving the community, involving potential evacuations and using information such from this plan. But into the future, we know continued training is a part of our staffing program.
Good.
We have new staff that started yesterday already getting trained on similar information such as this and how to respond.
Excellent, thank
But
you.
in his question about during the campfire, the campfire was such a unique situation. Fire was everywhere in town all the time.
Yep.
And there's no scenario here showing that.
Well, so.
I mean, you have the
there-
one in the center of town, which would be the
No,
closest.
there is, and so that's something I would really like the opportunity to address, because pre-campfire, we were operating a traffic control plan that's similar to this. And it identifies zones 3, 8, and 14 here on the eastern flank of where the fire first entered. We were operating off of this zone, and that would apply to the campfire scenario. But we didn't have it published. We know the priorities are to get traffic west to Skyway.
You couldn't, none of the laterals were open. It was a complete, okay, I mean, I don't know.
No, I understand that, but what's important here and the different in this plan are these more broader scenarios that require more, this is again, more comparable, that could require an all-at-once town-wide evacuation.
It looks like a really great plan, but to Greg's point, as long as everybody's trained on it so that they can get to. The only thing on page 1, I didn't bring my glasses. No, I'll figure it out. On the maps, on page 112,
The Butte Fire Safe Council
Paradise
maps.
Area Assembly Points. The Paradise Auditorium has not been the Paradise Auditorium since 1989.
So
It's the Paradise Performing Arts Center. That's what's on the name of the building. That's what everybody knows it as. I just think this should be in the next printing corrected.
It is, as well as when we partner with the Butte Fire Safe Council for an update on the next map, the county has updated their zones as well.
Okay.
And so the current map has old descriptions of North Pines, South Pines, old Magalia zones. Those are all numerical zones that are available on an interactive map, but they're not reflected here on this printed publication for distribution. So that's a part that we will continue to advocate for that work to happen for Butte County residents.
Mark, how will residents know which route they're supposed to take depending upon where the fire is? I mean, are we talking about getting the signs closing roads before we even tell them to evacuate? Or
No, and
how's that gonna work?
so this again is the amount of pre-planned decisions we can make in advance of the fire and respond appropriately with the resources we have and the information available. We're able to give instructions in a lot of the different means identified earlier this evening, talking about the early warning system. And so the messaging can start in conjunction when we're operating in EOC, and we understand we're operating in a scenario 5 similar situation. That EOC can function really well where the where the operations team is working on the facilitation of the evacuation, the PIO is working on the public messaging in conjunction and coordination with this event. Does that make sense? They're all gonna go out and not be dependent, waiting on one or the other. It's all gonna happen simultaneously with those different divisions of the EOC.
So I'm sitting in my house and somebody's gonna tell me I need to go down Skyway or go down another. How would I get the word if I were just Joe resident, know which road I'm supposed to take out of my zone?
Those are information items that are going to be prepared, whether it's a media release, social media, the code red notification, the verbal siren. We could utilize that as well to supplement that instruction.
And you use the mesh net to get to my app.
There we go.
Okay,
I'm ready.
Gotcha.
When you get to Wagstaff and the road closed signs up and the bips are there,
But
you have to go another way.
this is a great conversation. I'd like to articulate one point. There's never going to be a scenario where we say 100% with certainty, this is the evacuation route you should use in advance of an incident starting, because these are so dynamic and can be changing and can go over the top of you, and what you think is going to be an exit route is not. So this is what we can do to pre-plan and really formally document in a better way with more maps that could be shared, could not be if it was close to the real-time scenario, but at least here we have the strategies and objectives for what we would like to never happen, but the most probable significant events from all directions of town.
In part of our education of the public for fire safe preparedness, one of the things that Australia brought up with their big wildfires right after ours, and what happened to my wife, we need to advise people that keep a full gas tank. Because, and I don't know what our contingency plans are for like when a vehicle runs out of gas or breaks down on the roadway, blocking the evacuation route. You know, who's gonna push that car out of the way? So that people can escape.
Eric put his hand up, he's gonna go up there and push him.
Could be public works. Is that what those bars on the front of your?
Those push bumpers.
Okay, just checking. Thanks, Eric.
Do we want a motion or we have?
Yeah, looking for, any cards on this one?
I have no card.
Okay.
I move approval.
Second.
Motion by Bolin, seconded by Tryon. Adopt Resolution 2024-02, approving the Town of Paradise Wildland Fire Evacuation Traffic Control Plan. Roll call vote, Vice Mayor Bolin.
Aye.
Councilmember Crowder is absent. Councilmember Culleton.
Aye.
Councilmember Tryon.
Aye.
And Mayor Lasson.
Aye.
Thank you.
All right, we'll move on to item 6E, consider.
Mayor, could I make just a quick interjection on the issue?
It's
Okay.
done. It's done.
Okay.
Just your chance.
What's that? Okay. It's an important one.
Oh, what do you think, Vice Mayor?
Sure.
Go ahead.
Okay, it won't take long. I was a consultant with community care licensing and responsible for 19 counties, including Paradise.
One of the frustrations that Jim Brochures had, and I did too, he helped me coordinate the development of a disaster preparedness plan for community care licensing. Both your adult residentials, which no longer exist up here, but they're going to come back. Elderly facilities, you have one that has three facilities that I help get licensed. And then you're going to have others in terms of maybe a social rehab and so forth. The unfortunate thing is there was information available, and I'm going to be showing it with community care licensing, what Mark has just described, and making sure they have that as well as providing information on Code Red, so they provide potential licensees that information. But the frustrating thing is, after all the efforts you made, only probably 5% of the licensed facilities participated in your community meetings or were up to date on the disaster preparedness plan or the information you had available. I would suggest, and I would be glad to participate, as I've shared with Jim, that you put some emphasis on the permit and authorization for creating a licensed facility in our community, that the providers or potential licensee have to or show some willingness to participate in what we just discussed. So they know what's going on, they're up to date on it, and so forth. I would encourage that strongly. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we'll move on to consider approving the Community Development Block Grant Disaster Recovery Infrastructure Action Plan Amendment 2.
Mr. Mayor, I have to recuse myself from this item since Forest Service Road, although it is currently a private road, is one of the places he wants to send money. So I will step out of the room.
Okay.
There's three.
All right. Good evening again, Mayor Lassonde and remaining council. Again, this item is for CDBG-DR Infrastructure Action Plan Amendment Number 2. Some quick background on how we got here. Our 2019 original long-term recovery plan informed how we needed to dive deeper into making Paradise a safer, more resilient community from an infrastructure perspective. With that, we completed our EDA-funded transportation master plan that made us eligible and competitive to secure about $229 million for infrastructure improvements throughout the town of Paradise. From there, we've created a document that communicates between the town of Paradise and HCD, Housing Community Development, through the state for these funds that are allocated ultimately from Housing and Urban Development at the federal level. The action plan purpose, again, is that that document, that communication tool that also says, here's our plan, that documents the context, approach, and overview of the potential use of the allocated funds. And we've been consistent with the council. These action plans will be presented either annually during budget processing or as needed when critical issues develop requiring council action, such as recommendations to the project list. This original plan was adopted by the council in September of 2022. Paradise Town Council adopt the plan then, and then in, I'm sorry, did I say December? September 22, the original plan, we modified it again in December of 22, where we added additional projects that were made eligible through additional funds secured by the town's Active Transportation Program Cycle 6 awards. So here is our project list for Action Plan Amendment 1. We have a portion going to the Paradise Sewer Project for the design and right-of-way phase, as well as a portion for construction. Our Road Extension Phase 1 from Pence Road to, that would connect South Libby, Sawmill, and Edgewood. Pence Road widening, Skyway Pence intersection, and Pence Pathway Phase 2, really to complete the entire corridor. That's the sample created through another grant and construction complete on Pence between Billy and Wagstaff in front of the elementary school. The Upper Skyway widening from Billy, Wagstaff, and Skyway connectivity, again, add a turn lane, add sidewalk facilities, add capacity to that section of Skyway. Adding a bike path along Neal Road between town limits and Skyway, potentially extending either Elliott or Nunnally Road over to Pence Road. The Oliver Curve Pathway Project, which has a Class 1 bike path around the edge of the curve from Skyway to Billy Road. Intersection improvements at the location of Foster and Black Olive to improve safety and efficiency of that intersection, as well as the Forest Service road improvements that could connect Clark Road over to Skyway, whether that be for public ingress egress, looking at acquiring a private road, or for emergency access only and response times for CAL FIRE from Station 35. As well as 9 federal match projects that are either funded through FEMA, Hazard Mitigation Grant Program, or Federal Highways Administration related to the disaster. So the purpose of our amendment number 2 is that we were, in December, formally allocated $33 million towards Road Extension Phase 2. This would really be a centerpiece to kind of the most tangible response to the 2018 Camp Fire incepted that would increase ingress and egress or evacuation capacity for connecting long dead-end roads for another east-west arterial or east-west roadway that connects to the north-south evacuation routes. This was the highest scoring application in the state under the Local Transportation Climate Adaptation Program. The $33 million secured is excellent, but the total project cost is $66 million. We had 2 grant applications pending as of last month through the federal Safe Streets for All program, as well as the federal discretionary multimodal grant program for rural communities. Unfortunately, both of those were unsuccessful. California didn't even receive a single award for one of those programs. under the rural program, I believe, and it's very, very competitive. And so additional funding is needed for Row Road Phase 2 pre-construction and construction phases. So off the top, our biggest priority here is to make sure that we are moving the Row Road Phase 2 project forward and not jeopardizing the $33 million that we were recently awarded. And we're recommending transferring a portion of funds to this in the amount of $4.2 million of CDBG-DR funds to maintain this progress on that project. We also have other project budget concerns due to rising costs that we're seeing in the industry. And so this could be an opportunity to clean some of that up and really look at the overall picture, operating a $200 million budget, knowing that these individual project costs are not getting cheaper with each passing day. So with that, our original action plan changes recommended in the staff report before you was to remove the Oliver Curve Pathway project from the CDBG-DR funded list. And again, I want to mention that all of these projects are safety related, whether that's day-to-day or in the emergency evacuation scenario, and this is based off community input. And so when we're looking to balance the overall needs of the program and doing the improvements that will benefit our community and our recovering housing population to attract residents that feel safe because there's adequate ingress and egress through town, we've made these recommendations. With that, we're looking to add the $4.2 million to Row Road Extension Phase 2 to keep the LTCAP funding moving, as well as adding $6.9 million to Row Road Extension 1 project to account for budget increases that we're forecasting, and then adding $1 million to these two projects, the Foster Black Olive intersection project, as well as the Forest Service Road Extension project, for budget increases that we're, again, forecasting. Now, since the publication of the staff report, additional consideration has been given to present an alternate action plan that I believe can help balance the overall picture, maybe even a little bit better than the original recommendation. So from here, we can reduce the Oliver Curve Pathway project funding by $10 million. And what this will do is it'll allow us to compete well for under the Active Transportation Program Cycle 7 project. Again, this one is really strictly bicycle pedestrian project, and again, a portion of that can be used for emergency evacuation on that bike path if we absolutely had to. But on the day-to-day function, this is going to be a bike ped project, and it's much needed and a part of our overall capital improvement program priority. But if we reduce the funding and reserve $3.1 million of the Oliver Curve Pathway project for CDBG-DR funds, it will allow us to submit grant applications under ATP 7 that will allow us to achieve the highest possible score in competitiveness in leveraging funds when we bring to the table 20% of the project cost that is not theirs. So that is really critical, especially for how competitive that program is. And if we're able to bring $3.1 million, I'm confident with the amount of work and effort and the planning and the community involvement that's gone into developing this project, that it'll compete very, very well under ATP Cycle 7, although we will not know the outcome of that determination until at least December of this year. From there, this alternate recommendation would change. It would be the same as the prior recommendation for adding the $4.2 million for Row Road Extension Phase 2. It would add only $3.8 million to Row Road Extension Phase 1. Again, I'll mention this represents a high risk for cost increases due to the conceptual nature of the project now, inclusion of a bridge and rising industry costs. If the cost increases come to fruition, council would need to provide further direction on how we rectify that. Further, it would be consistent for adding the $1 million for the two projects listed here. At this point, I'll just remind the community, we're talking a lot of big projects that are really just now starting. And so if you're hearing about Row Road, if you're hearing about Oliver Curve, we are in the early days. Some are a little bit further in design than others. But for the large part, these projects are just now starting and require different checkpoints of the council where we bring information, we complete the environmental reviews, and have council really give those red light, green light, let's proceed to the next stage to do these projects because they're going to be sensitive. They involve right-of-way acquisition. They involve different changes and environmental impacts that are going to be further studied in the development of those projects. But overall, they're just starting now. The funds were recently allocated last year. We're kicking off environmental and design this year and hoping to start bringing some of these efforts to construction in 2025, 6, 7. With that, we're asking for council. I did have this because I wasn't sure on how it would break down, but the action plan includes information about the sewer project, but there's no changes there. So I think we can just continue with as it's printed in the agenda item with the remaining council here. And so with that, I'm open to any questions about either of the two alternates. After further study, I would recommend this alternate action plan that provides the Oliver Curve additional funds to remain the highest competitiveness in a very competitive program, as well as address keeping Railroad Phase 2 rolling, which is really important for us.
Yes. If I could, both Councilmember Tryon and I both drive up the Oliver Curve Road on a regular basis, and I have a concern calling it strictly a bicycle pedestrian project because I don't see it as such. At least once or twice a month, if not more, as I'm driving towards Skyway on that road, I see trucks coming down and crossing over the yellow line. And there's no escape route for anybody going up there. The dirt shoulder is only a couple feet wide, and there's been times when I've seen kids riding their bikes up there, and I've even seen a mom pushing one of her strollers, running behind strollers. And so when the truck comes down, the worst case scenario is I have an option of do I get hit by the truck or do I run over the mom in her buggy? So I consider this a safety issue, not just a bicycle pedestrian project, and so I'm concerned about the delay on that. Tell me, by going to that cycle 7, what's the delay on the implementation of that project? What are we talking about, a year, 5 years, what?
Well, if we were to secure the funds, the overall delivery delay could be nominal if the funds were awarded. It could land in about the similar time for implementation in this program. The Oliver Curve project is a little unique in that design and environmental are mostly complete. But the availability for funds in ATP Cycle 7, I believe, are not until 25-6 and 26-7. And so if we were to secure those funds, we could expect construction to be about that time frame, similar to how we would have it now.
Councilman Tryon?
Starting out with Row Road, have you contacted any property owners because this is going to be a right-of-way issue?
Right, and so for the project development process in contacting private property owners, that work has not begun, and it would when more environmental studies are done and workshops are hosted and information being advertised about the potential project. And so that comes probably, I would say, late this year, mostly next year, where we're starting to do and understand what type of acquisitions are necessary for that project and informing the environmental and informing the design of that project.
And I trust your judgment on the sequence of things.
Yep.
But I would just recommend that we start contacting people on right-of-way earlier versus later, because I could see us having a real issue with putting a bunch of money into the project and then having an issue with someone not wanting to sell a right-of-way or give a right-of-way. And I do understand we have part of it covered because there is an old right-of-way that goes through there.
That's correct.
Still, even that's gonna be a bit of a challenge for some landowners.
Correct.
So that's sort of my concern, is that, we have a sunk cost on what we're doing with Row Road, which I am totally behind. We absolutely need it.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm all on board for it. But I would recommend contacting these landowners sooner rather than later, just to get an idea.
We have the same
And then
issue
sec-
with Elliott and Nunley too.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Big time.
Oh, yeah. And probably with Forest Service. And then my other question is actually about that turn on Oliver. I'm surprised we haven't had a fatality there,
Same here.
just to be really perfectly honest with you. I've come around that turn, if there's somebody walking on it, like, they have a choice to jump into at least a 3-foot ditch to get out of the way. When trucks come down it, and I followed several trucks, it's really difficult for them to stay within the lines. Most of the time they do not, especially depending on their speed. There's also frequently deer that cross right there. And I have seen, especially during traffic time, that traffic gets backed up all the way around that turn. And it's just a miracle that somebody hasn't come around that turn and smacked into the back of a stopped vehicle. So, I mean, it's, and I know that you have a lot of projects and you're trying to balance the entire town, I get it. And I think just for some of us, we travel it, so we know how really dangerous it is. And there are kids that have bicycles on that street, and I mean, they seriously, if two cars meet, those kids have no place to go on their bicycles. And if they don't have the wherewithal to grab their bike and jump in the ditch, I mean, there's seriously no place for them to go. And there's no place for pedestrians to go, so. And I know that you probably know all that, but it's not a good situation. And so my other question is, can we use any of the local transportation fund out of BCAG for it? Is there anything that's still available in there that we could pull over?
For the LTF funds that kind of help with those small little budgetary concerns, I believe we have less than $1 million remaining in that account.
Okay.
So it would be very difficult. And again, I just want to mention that the Oliver Curve merits are really, really important, and very familiar with that route traveled and have seen the issues that you've described, especially when the population was larger. And so the project and the recommendation here is really the best way that we can continue to secure funds externally and deliver the best program. And so however the council would like to proceed is some direction that we will take.
Because the other thing about that is one of your larger growing areas over there. And I'll be honest, because of that turn, I take another route as much as possible, just because I don't like going, especially at night, or if I'm pulling a trailer. So, and I know that you get it, but I just don't think we can emphasize enough, that is really dangerous. And like I said, I can take another route, some people can't, so.
There was no other place to take the money besides Oliver Curve?
Well, and so when we get back to the overall project list, this was you could strike the Foster Black Olive project, you could strike the Forest Service Road Improvements project and still not quite make it. You could strike the Elliott Nunnally Extension project, which in my professional opinion might be the #2 most single life-saving project short of Road Phase 1.
And even Forest Services for that matter.
Well, right, yeah. And so there's different options on the project prioritization. This list, it was really prioritized in this list based on community feedback and prior efforts by the council to consider which ones to move forward.
So just out of curious, the Foster Black, sorry.
Go ahead.
The Foster Black Olive, so when they put in the bus transportation hub there, will that handle some of what you want to do in that area or no?
Can you repeat that question?
So they're putting in the big bus transportation hub right there.
At Birch and Black Olive?
Yeah.
Yes.
Foster's on the other side of it.
Oh, that's right, it's clear on the other side, never mind.
So, living up on that side of town since '69, we moved over that side of town. That curve's always been a challenge and fun as a kid to navigate. Yeah, we went through a few bikes on that one. I think our biggest problem there, I would say is speed. It's the same as it's always been. It's a hazard, but if we could slow people down somehow on that curve for right now, that would take care of a lot of the issues we're talking about. And I know because it's 50 years of that being my route, and I'm back over on that side of town now again, so I go on that quite a bit. Speed is the one thing that's huge on that one. And I think it's important, but I do believe that this road and this other stuff is more important for the for the town as a whole, as opposed to that one. I hope we don't walk away from that, and it doesn't sound like you are.
No.
But I think looking at the Paradise as a whole, that is, these other ones are important. The thing I don't understand is you're 33 million short, and you're only picking up 8 million.
Oh, I apologize. That is a key component of the conversation. So we are seeking a 28 million through the federal RAISE program, and don't ask me what RAISE stands for, but it's a nice acronym that has to do with infrastructure. But that's through the Federal Department of Transportation. The open call for projects is right now. The application's due on the 28th of February. We are really excited and feel really good about the prospects of that project being funded through that program. We are going to do everything we can to advocate for that project, whether that be through, just a stellar application, again, putting in all of the efforts through the Transportation Master Plan for their consideration. And really, we have a very attractive project that's mostly funded. A lot of people are seeking 100% funds. And so I'm confident that the RAISE program will be a great opportunity to make that project whole. Now, the question is, well, what if we continue to hear no? That's when staff will come back to council and say, conditions have changed, we're not successful. Do we want to tell the California Transportation Commission, you can have your $33 million back, and we will reallocate the 4.2 elsewhere in this program.
Okay.
And so our goal is to continue to secure those funds, deliver these projects as best as we can with the information we have and the funding available. And then when those answers come, we will keep you posted.
And you'll come back to us with it?
Yep.
Okay. All right, that makes more sense. We're not there.
No, it doesn't solve the 28 million.
No. All right.
I like the alternate plan that he's got on the action plan, so.
Yeah, I do too. I would move, unless there's any cards.
I have no cards.
I would move, we move forward with the alternate action plan.
I'll second that.
Motion by Bolin, seconded by Lassonde to approve the alternate plan number 2 that was presented at council tonight for the Community Development Block Grant Disaster Recovery Infrastructure Action Plan Amendment.
With the requirement that you're gonna get the rest of the money for Oliver Kirk.
Yes, we will submit the best application possible.
Roll call vote. Vice Mayor Bolin?
Aye.
Councilmember Crowder is absent. Councilmember Culleton is absent. Councilmember Tryon?
Aye.
And Mayor Lassonde.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Okay.
Good job, and thanks for what you're doing. I mean, you guys are getting some incredible grants
Thank you.
and doing a phenomenal job. So.
Absolutely. All right. We'll move on to item 6F. Consider renewing.
Sorry.
Incoming, yes. Consider reviewing and approving the state legislative advocacy platform and concurring with staff recommendation for legislative committee functions and process.
Good evening again, Mayor and Council. So tonight, we are asking you to consider a state advocacy platform. So this is a platform that would coincide with the federal platform that you have previously approved. So it was actually first approved in December of 2020. That federal advocacy platform really is kind of the holding place for all of the advocacy issues that the town of Paradise feels strongly about and uses our voice collectively to move forward. And so with the changing landscape all the time, that is a document that we revisit and update. It was last updated in March of 2023. Recently, we realized we really need a state companion to that federal platform as well. And so with the input of the legislative committee, we drafted a state legislative platform, and that is here for your review. It really does mirror the federal platform in many ways. Of course, it has been tweaked for the state, and so there are some differences, mainly in some of the importance in weight that have been given to some of these items. Items like insurance and healthcare really have been moved to the forefront in this plan because those really have a large state component that we want to highlight here. All of these advocacy items, though, of course, are very, very important to the town of Paradise, and we really want this to be the place where they are fully explained and have all the information available. I also want to really be clear that this platform is not really something that we would be going into meetings and handing to legislators. It's not terribly long, but it's certainly longer than we would utilize in that type of a meeting. We would create informational sheets on the specific items that we were discussing with each individual lawmaker or staff or committee to talk with them about the issues that we would pull from this document. This really is a way for council to be able to agree upon a platform of issues that we can then use moving forward. So that's really the first part of this agenda item, and the second is to talk a little bit about the legislative committee itself and just formalize a bit the process in which that committee works. That legislative committee was formed last year in the beginning of 2023, February in fact, so almost a year ago. And that committee, there's 2 council members who sit on that committee, as well as the town manager and myself. And that is the committee where we look at legislative issues, and anytime there is a meeting about advocacy, that is the group that is consulted and joins those meetings. And so I wanted to bring up the process of this committee and how this would work in response to this platform and also the federal platform, as well as any advocacy and legislative meetings or trips that are held. So what is being proposed tonight is that this committee would meet on an ad hoc basis. And let me step back for a moment. This really is how this committee has been functioning for the past year. This is really just to formalize this a bit and make sure council agrees with this process. So the legislative committee, again, would meet on an ad hoc basis as needs arise. And any issues that are covered within the advocacy platform, whether it's the federal platform or the state platform that have been approved by council, those are issues that staff can reasonably work towards without additional council approval. So for example, if a letter is requested on an issue that is within the platform, that is something staff could work on and prepare without needing to come to council for approval for that. Of course, we may come to council to sign that or something like that, but that work could be done without specific guidance. If there are advocacy items that come up that are not in the platform, and this happens often where there are things that come up in the state legislature or federally that are not covered or are not something that we normally weigh in on, those types of issues would need to go to the legislative committee and the full council to give staff direction to work on those or to weigh in on that on behalf of the town of Paradise. So this really kind of formalizes that process and makes sure that we all are working from the same book of information. And then finally, as I mentioned, the council members that are appointed to the legislative committee would be the first invited to advocacy meetings, legislative meetings, and any trips that are necessary for those types of things. So that is how the committee would function. There is no financial impact to this item. This platform was prepared by staff in consultation with our state lobbyist who is under contract. And so that is the information I have for you tonight, and if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
I got a question. Other than the page maybe being updated with who current mayor and people are. But
oh, yes.
The question is, this is a good idea to have this plan in both federally and state, but I'm curious why we wouldn't have, as part of this, something to do with private roads. I mean, our community was devastated and wiped out by the Camp Fire. We have more private roads than public roads, and that, but it's an issue that if it's going to take some federally changes or some policies to, and maybe never help us, but maybe it will help the community that gets wiped out by a hurricane.
Sure.
Or
that is an excellent point, and that actually is in our federal advocacy platform for FEMA. Yes, it's a policy recommendation for FEMA. This is the state platform, but for FEMA, we actually have some policy recommendations.
Absolutely.
I can send you a
copy. We talked to them about that when we were back in DC. Yes. We talked to the agencies about that.
No, I mean, that's great, because, we are the prime candidate to lead that charge for people, just like they've added all those other disasters on the tax relief bill.
Right.
Like, if you break it, if you're willing to own what you break, own it all.
So that is part of the federal platform because it's appropriate in that one.
Okay, well, I have any more questions.
Great.
Good luck with the state.
Okay. Any questions from the council? Any cards on this issue?
I have no cards.
Do I hear a motion?
Motion to approve.
She moved to approve, you second it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Motion by Tryon, seconded by Culleton. Roll call vote. Councilmember, Vice Mayor Boland?
Aye.
Councilmember Crowder is absent. Councilmember Culleton?
Aye.
Councilmember Tryon? Aye. And Mayor Lassonde?
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to the last item on this list. Consider appointing council representatives to 2 vacant committee positions due to resignation.
Okay, so let me just explain to you on the first one, the sewer project. So when I got looking at the committees, because we do them in such a rush, it's like this, like uncontrolled chaos, I think, when we do these committees. My term ends in a year. I don't know whether or not I'll be reelected. Right now, there's really not much going on in the sewer. So I feel it's in the best interest of the town to have somebody be on the sewer committee that can maybe get their feet wet this year, because in 25, 26, we may have to go back into negotiations. So to me, it's in the best interest of the town to have somebody else in there that has another 2 years on their term. So that is my consideration for that.
And that was an item that was on my platform when I ran for the council seat. So
Correct.
I'm definitely interested in.
And that is why I really thought about it, because you have two more years past my year.
Yeah.
And so it makes more sense for you to get on there, get an understanding of what's going on. I didn't want to use feet wet again. But it's just in the best interest of the town to have you on it versus me. So, because of that.
We are not talking about that, already, sorry. Yes, I would accept that. Now, I may have to drop, I'm now at 7 as primary and 3 alternates, and I'm starting to feeling a little bit overloaded.
It works for me.
Of course it will.
Yeah, works for me too.
Yeah, I would take that, but I may end up coming back and saying I can't, well.
If you need me to cover for you, just let me know, and I'll be more than glad to do that.
I know,
Yeah.
yeah. I just want to do a good job in anything I do, so I
Yeah.
just don't want to get spread too thin. All right.
Yeah, and I had a ton of committees last year, so I get it.
Yeah.
That's why I'm kind of,
I hear it. Okay,
so,
all right.
okay. So the second one, just to let you guys know my thoughts on this one. I love the legislative stuff. Honestly, it's kind of what I live for. I spend a lot of time in that space. But I feel to operate with integrity, when we started this committee, we said it would be the mayor and the vice mayor. And to me, this isn't about personality, it's about process. It's about what is the process for this committee. And I truly believe, even though it's my true love, I truly believe that it should be the mayor and the vice mayor. And this is like the budget committee. You know, it's like we have the mayor and the vice mayor so that they can understand what's going on. And I think it needs to be the same way with the legislative committee. Again, it's like with the budget committee. If you guys had a CPA sitting on your council with you, I'm sure that one of you would step back and go, hey, do you want to be on the budget committee? We'll step back. So I feel that this is the same way. And again, this is about process. It is about 5, 10, 15 years from now, when none of us are on this board anymore, how do we want this committee to be set up? And I mean, honestly, Ron, if you don't want to be on the committee, then you can have Steve fill the position for you. So it's not a problem. But I'm just saying, as we look down the road 15 years from now, when none of us are here, I think the process should be that it's the mayor and the vice mayor, and then if they want to have somebody else, they can do that. But that is my reasoning behind this, because I think that's what's in the best interest of the town, to set this up correctly by resolution for it to be the mayor and the vice mayor.
Because right now, it's not forced to be the mayor or the vice mayor.
Correct. It's not set up like the budget committee is.
Right. Okay. Greg, what's your point, what's your view on this?
I want to see Rose stay on it. I mean, it's not set up to be mayor, vice mayor, and that is her world. I'd like to see her stay on it and tell her too bad,
But I mean, if it is the mayor and the vice mayor and you don't want to be on it, you want me to be on it for you, I'll be glad to do that. I'm just saying, again, this is about process. This is about what's in the best interest of setting this committee up as we go
Well, and
forward.
we can talk about this year moving forward and make it mayor, vice mayor necessity. But as of right now, I like to see you stay on it. That's my thoughts.
And again, I'm just trying to operate with integrity, because I was very much in favor of it being the mayor and the vice mayor. And so I don't want to be a hypocrite at this point and go, gee, I really want to stay on the
Isn't that the
committee.
way it was set up though?
It was set up as the
Yeah,
mayor and the
so-
vice
It was not
mayor.
voted that way.
Yeah,
But when we got to the end of it, we didn't do it as a resolution, we just,
assigned the mayor.
and so my request to you guys is to do it as a resolution, to be the mayor and the vice mayor, and then if you guys don't want to do it, you can assign somebody else to take your places. But I really feel like it should be the mayor and the vice mayor.
You know, I tend to agree with that. I mean, I agreed with it when we brought that up. I didn't realize it. I thought that's what we were doing. If we didn't do it.
It was never put in a resolution that way.
Okay, well then.
And again, I'm just trying to operate with integrity, because I'm the one that's
Yeah, and if you want to
recommending.
keep doing it, and if Greg wants to not go do it, or not even want to, you know.
Well, I'll have to give up something to do that, so I'd like to see Greg do it, or,
I'd really like to see Rose stay on it. I mean, that's her world, and it's not my world.
and it's not mine either.
And you know,
Somebody's-
I
learned
I learned a lot
And-
this year, but I still got a lot to learn.
And all I'm gonna ask is, can you guys please set it up as a resolution that it's the mayor and the vice mayor? And that if you want me to serve for you, I'll be more than glad to do it.
And
But that's how I feel it needs
so
to
if we bring it back as a resolution. Because
We can do it now as a
Can
resolution.
we do it now?
be. Yeah.
No, I don't think so.
It's not on the agenda.
No, no, no.
Oh, got
So if we
it. I
bring
see
it
what you're
back as a
saying.
resolution where we create it as the legislative committee is the mayor and the vice mayor or their designee,
Exactly.
then everything will work. And then-
Yeah.
So. can we
If that's
do
okay
that
with you
for
guys.
next-
Again, I'm just trying to stand on
Yeah,
principle
no,
here.
no,
That's just my thing.
That's on the.
If council wants to direct staff to bring back that resolution, then
Yeah.
we will bring back that resolution.
Are you okay?
The next meeting.
Yes, I'm good.
I'm good.
But you're my designee.
And Steve's my designee.
And I would be honored to do it for you, but again,
Who's Steve?
it's principle for me.
You're Woody.
No, I'm Steven.
I didn't say Steven. I'm talking about Steve Crowder, who's on it right now.
So do we have council concurrence that Councilmember Tryon will remain on the legislative committee and that Mayor Lassonde will be on the Paradise Sewer Regionalization Committee?
But we are bringing it
Back as with a resolution to be the mayor and vice mayor or designee.
Or designate. And I think that probably the budget committee should say the same thing, or designate.
Or designate.
Because I'm sure if you guys,
If we had a CPA, we'd probably say,
exactly, I would hope you would.
yeah,
No offense,
No.
but I mean, okay,
in a heartbeat.
all right.
Council,
Thank you for hearing me out on both of those, I appreciate it, guys.
Thank you.
council concurs?
Yes.
Council concurs.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, done. All right. Item 7, council-initiated agenda items. Did you have one? You look on there.
Not right now.
Okay.
Maybe next one.
Okay, I'd like next month to talk about, or agendize the, adding some art to the traffic control boxes that we have around town. Right now, they tend to be graffiti magnets or lost animal magnets and all the tape and whatnot. I've seen other towns have an art improvement program that does that. Sacramento's one of them. Yuba City's another. The town I used to live in, Pleasanton, had all over. It really adds to the look of the town. One of the nice things is where I would have before told people, turn left at Jack in the Box. I can't do that now. But if I can say turn left at that daffodil painted box, it'll help people know where to turn because they sometimes don't see the signs that says it's,
The sign's still up.
well, yeah, no, that sign's off.
Kentucky Fried.
Yeah, Kentucky Fried's still up, but all the rest, so I would like, and I'm intending to fund the first 2 projects out of my council salary. So,
They'll do one.
well, you don't know. They pay me more than they pay you, you
No,
know.
they don't.
So if a majority of council wants to see a proposal for your consideration, then we'd ask you to direct staff to bring back a proposal. I would ask for a little grace that, maybe not at the next meeting, but bring it back at a future meeting.
Yeah, future meeting.
All right.
Spring of 24.
Question is, do you want to direct staff to do that?
Do I hear anybody that doesn't want to hear that idea? Okay. Hearing none, yes. Out and a future council.
And how are we gonna approve the art? What do you consider art? Let's not do that right now, but that's.
They've got to come up with that,
Okay.
And I'll tell you, that's the whole problem I have.
That is,
What's art to you is not art to me, and it's not art to them. That's so subjective.
It is, and we had that discussion before, and I'm asking the staff to come up with a
Okay.
way of doing that.
Everything's just going so smooth. I don't want to get into the art thing.
No, it's a small
Well,
piece
but
of
you know
art.
what, and in doing that, why don't find out from these other communities, what is the cost, never mind the cost of putting the art there, what is the cost of graffiti removal and maintenance? I mean, because there's gonna be a cost to it, you know.
Because, I mean, they want to do graffiti.
It'll be more than your salary.
They'll do it over the art. I mean,
Most cases, they don't. Right now, they do put the stickers that says lost what, or they have a yard sale, whatever, and then you got the tape residue and you got all the other stuff. and-
Okay, direction to staff,
Yes.
come back with something.
Okay, let's move
And
on.
and I have two other
You got-
things, and you're gonna so hate me for this. Deep breath, it'll be fine. So we talked at one point about getting drones, and do we have drones?
We do, we're working through that process to get the program up and running.
I knew you knew where I was going with this. So I know that we were gonna get a policy in place for it, and so, and I'm sure you're working on it, but I just kinda wanted to keep that in the radar. I don't know, are you ready for us to calendar it, or do you want some more time?
what's a drone?
A drone?
With a camera?
Did I not pronounce it?
Yeah, so the last time we brought the military ordinance back for review and update, we discussed the program, and that's actually one of the items that's already authorized in there. We were fortunate that we acquired 2 drones from Chico PD that they were replacing with updated drones. And then, of course, you guys voted to accept the donation from PG&E for those 2 drones that were about $6,000 a piece. So since then, we have developed a policy that is approved by Lexipol, which is the builder of our entire policy manual, and complies with all the laws and regulations. And we've been working with legal. There's paperwork we've had to file with the FAA, and we have all of our drone pilots that we selected have passed their Part 107 through the FAA, so they're certified drone pilots. And we're currently working with risk management for the insurance side of the actual drones themselves for the liability. So the program is well on its way. It just hasn't taken flight yet.
No pun intended.
Yeah.
So we will see some type of a policy on how they'll be used, when they'll be used, when they will not be used.
It's it's already on the
Like over
books.
personal property is a no.
Well, there's a lot of variations as to when you can use them. And so a part of the program is a flight data logging software. So every time that drone is turned on and leaves the ground, it tracks the flight. And there's also, I believe it's pushed off till April, that the FAA is requiring these emitters that transmit their location when they're in flight. So all that stuff is logged and will be made available every 30 days on our website, unless there's information in there that might compromise an ongoing investigation or something to that effect.
So here's what might be a good idea, whenever you have time, whenever you feel that you're in a good spot, is that maybe you could present all of that to us, so we have a good idea and the public has a good idea of what these drones are gonna be used for, what our policy is, what the do's and don'ts are. Is that possible?
Sure, yeah, we can revisit that. I gave one presentation before, but now that we're getting close to having the program up and running, we can revisit that.
Okay. And then the other piece of that is we have cameras on some of the towers. And do we have like a policy in place on how those are gonna be used, when they're gonna be used?
So that is probably going to be developed through the implementation of those cameras, but at this point, as Colette had mentioned earlier, all the equipment for monitoring or activating the towers, it hasn't even been installed, it's on site. And so that training and availability and policies and procedures as to who accesses what, we haven't even begun that process.
Okay, perfect. And thank you, I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
No, that's fine.
But I just kind of wanted to make sure that, we have, because we get questions on it.
Mhm.
When that plane starts to fly, the drone starts to fly, we're probably gonna have residents that are gonna have questions.
Sure.
I own a shotgun, if it goes down in my neighborhood.
So.
Just kidding.
Cautious.
So cameras on signal lights and stuff like that. You see that in a lot of cities.
Yeah, we
Is
don't
that
have
paid
those.
by them? Do they pay for that, or does that? is that a
Yeah,
grant
for
thing,
instance,
or-
the city of Chico, I believe they went with a Motorola solution, like 37 cameras or something that incorporate license plate reading capability. That's something that they're paying for
They pay for themselves?
themselves, yeah. There is data sharing that goes in with those networking, and of course, all of that's driven and set by policies and procedures and state laws and things like
There's
that.
nothing with the state that they want those and pay you to put them in or anything?
No, I mean, I'm sure there's some grants out there for LPR systems, but we do have 2 LPR systems that are mobile on 2 patrol cars that was a part of the body camera system. And again, everything's set by policy for retention and things like that, so.
Right.
On the cameras on towers, my understanding was that when it sees private property, that's going to be blanked out, so there's not going to be any issue.
That's my understanding as well.
There won't be any issue. You're looking at the roads and traffic on the roads.
I think that is the ultimate goal, is that if we have access to those cameras in an emergency, can that help us, guide the evacuation process, things of that
So,
nature?
Well, I was just gonna say, these are awesome questions, but I know we've got to kind of stick with the agenda item of future agenda items.
okay.
And thank you, Chief. I didn't,
No problem.
again, didn't mean to put you
What
on
was
the
your
spot.
question? I can answer it for you.
So we have drone pilots and you guys get this thing going on. One of the conversations I had earlier today with Tony on code enforcement, on weed abatement, was since we have drones, it would be a great tool to go fly over sections of town and then overlay mapping on it so we could identify, rather than somebody in a truck driving up and down every street trying to see properties, because some of the properties you can't even get to.
Yeah, so there's limitations on operating drones out of line of sight and things of that nature, and so you couldn't just sit at the brick and fly a drone all around
No, I know
town.
that, but I mean,
Yeah,
if you have a drone pilot, if that's something that PD could help code enforcement by going and mapping a section of town to where then they can look at their maps and say, okay, we need to send letters to these people because they got.
Council members, we will agendize a full drone discussion at a future meeting.
Okay,
How's
so
that?
there are.
well, we'll
And
just
that was
have
my
to,
original question. Like, whenever you're ready to present that,
Sure.
I would love to hear it.
yeah,
So
so
thank you.
there'll be limitations. Scott will be leaning on you for guidance on a lot of these things, so we'll see what we can do.
So
Thank you.
then I'd like to maybe have a discussion at a future council meeting about red light cameras. There are people running red lights all over town. We don't have enough police to monitor. And so maybe we could lease some. And, if we can tag a few of these dump trucks that are running lights, that stuff will stop. And
Sure.
there's citizens doing it too.
Yeah.
I don't know.
And again, there's legal issues with red light cameras
No, I know
and sending
that.
out the tickets in the mail and things of that
Yeah,
nature.
Again, if council would like that as a future agenda item, we can,
Yeah, just, does it make sense? The problem is, it's happening all over town.
Sure.
Okay,
Somebody's-
is that the will of the council? And
Which one?
the red light cameras that he just asked to be future agendized? No objection?
Okay.
No,
And
okay.
if you guys want it,
I think-
I don't know if it's something we want
Well,
to.
is it even feasible? I mean, if it's not feasible, we don't do it.
Yeah, there's some legalities behind those as well.
and we did say yes, whenever he's ready to do.
Yes, yes.
So is that direction to put red light cameras on a future agenda or not?
Yeah.
That is direction to bring back discussion about that.
Yeah, just,
What are the ramifications, what are the issues, those types of things.
Okay.
Okay. Anything else from any council?
from a timing standpoint,
No.
no hurry,
No
okay.
hurry.
yeah.
25, instead of-
Yeah. Okay, I think we're done with that one.
Thanks, Chief.
You're welcome.
Okay, council reports on committee representation. We'll start over.
So, most of my committees were canceled due to the holidays. However, I did attend Butte County Fire Safe Council, great group of people, and hopefully I will be attending them regularly. I would like to say that I would encourage everybody to donate to the Fire Safe Council. You can go on the Fire Safe Council's website, and for $50 a year, you can be a, wildfire ready membership to it. You can go to buttefire-safe-council.net, and they have an opportunity that you can be either $50 a year or $5 monthly. So I would really encourage everybody to go on and to donate, and it's a good cause. They can use the money. They do a lot of work in our community. And so again, FireSafe.net, $50 yearly, $5 monthly for a great cause. Please go sign up and do that. Thank you.
No, I don't have
All right, on December 13th, I was at the PID liaison meeting. This was, Greg, you were at that? Yes. Interesting meeting. December 18th, I met with Brenda Naran from PG&E. She's the government representative from that. Had a discussion about some of the issues with PG&E and undergrounding and roads, and especially if they have a detour route, that they shouldn't block the detour route along the primary route. They, like in our neighborhood, had a interview on the 20th with KPAY radio, and then on the 21st, interview with KRCR TV, Channel 7. We had the special town council meeting on the 22nd. I was at the rededication of College Hill Monument for the Sierra Polytechnic Institute. I found that very interesting. I didn't realize we had a college in this town. I saw the road called College. I had no idea why it was named that, and that was a good one, other than being in the rain. Woody was there, and so was Steve Crowder. And so it was a good time. Had a meeting afterwards at the Railroad Museum, so with lots of food. And I did have, on the 2nd of January, a phone conversation with the mayor of Maui, Richard Beeson. He was very appreciative of our town manager bringing the picture of Paradise that was drawn, and also the challenge coins. And we talked about all the issues that I remembered. He was especially concerned about where did we put all our hazardous waste, because that's their #1 problem now. The people on the island wanted it all shipped off island. FEMA told them it'll cost them $1 billion to ship it off island, so of course that's not an option. So they're reopening a toxic waste dump, and there's people complaining about that, and there's all kinds of other issues that we didn't encounter that they're going through. So they're going through a tough time right now. Yeah, that was all I had.
So is there any more report out from the PID meeting?
As in what they're going to do, or?
How'd they go?
It was a good meeting. We talked about a number of things. They totally disagreed with the percentage completion metric that Mark presented, but it didn't go any further than that. Did you have an update on that 25% completion rate?
Yeah, that was their number, not mine.
Understand.
So,
you had it on our forms and all that.
yeah, I don't have an updated number that they're happy with yet, but our next update for the overall utility clearance and undergrounding will be here in a month or two, but we'll get that new number from them.
Basically, what he's reporting out is what all the utilities are undergrounding, and they were in last place on it, and they didn't agree with the number.
They wanted to break it out with laterals and veins.
Yeah.
It was.
They're gonna be an ongoing problem.
That report?
That's right.
Did we talk about the report that they did to LAFCO?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
To some extent. That's it. All right.
Thank you.
Town manager report. Oh, sorry, future agenda items. Oh, we did that. That's right. Sorry, my apologies. Town manager report.
No other report, other than I did want to make sure council was aware on that piece of art that we gave to Maui. The frame was actually crafted by a local craftsman here in Paradise out of reclaimed wood from the fire. And it was beautiful work that he donated as part of that. So just wanted you to be aware of that.